It's Saturday night. An 18-year-old Tyrone Larry is looking sharp.
A friend wanted to throw a party. There was going to be a lot of girls there. And everybody thought it'd be a good idea just to, get together and enjoy ourselves.
Tyrone's little brother, Tim, arrived at the party a half hour earlier.
We were just was going to go there and, mingle. There was a good amount of people there already.
This was a big party. There were a lot of kids there. And they were crammed into a 2-bedroom apartment.
A lot of people was drinking. People was just talking, dancing and stuff like that.
Tyrone spots his brother Tim in the crowd.
What's going on? It's good.
He was there talking to some girls. He had 2 girls on both sides.
Where you get these ladies from?
There's some girls I met at the mall, invited them over.
Yeah, that's my little bro. Must be a thing.
It wasn't 10 minutes after that they heard the shot.
Everybody hit the deck. Tyrone was scanning the crowd, trying to figure out what was going on.
And he looked over into the living room area where he observed a bunch of people kind of gathered around somebody laying on the floor.
Come on, Tim. Tim, come on, man.
I already said my brother, Timothy, he was shot.
Tyrone, you better get up here, man. Tim, come on, man. Get up, man.
I rushed over there to see, was he okay? Was he really shot? He wasn't moving. He couldn't really say anything. He was just holding his chest.
Come here.
And I was just telling him to hold on, it'll be all right.
I'm here, man. I'm here. It's me, Tyrone.
Just keep him as comfortable I can, just let him know I was there.
Call an ambulance!
Across town, Lt.Joe Kenda and his wife Kathy are saying their goodbyes.
We were at a dinner party with a bunch of our friends in anticipation of the coming holidays. Oops. I was surprised we stayed there as long as we did before something came up, as they say.
At least we made it through dinner.
Kenda arrives on the scene, where Detective J.D. Walker briefs him on what they know so far.
So what do we got?
16-year-old kid, single gunshot wound to the chest.
Do you know who he is?
Timothy Pert.
Timothy Pert was only a sophomore at nearby Sierra High School.
When Lieutenant Kenda got on the scene, I explained the chaos that we had.
So who are these people? Neighbors?
Witnesses. They were all upstairs with the kid when he was shot.
He was attending a party in an apartment with a number of other individuals, most of whom had fled the area, and no one in the crowd wishes to be identified now.
So a fight breaks out and someone pulls a gun.
That's what it looks like.
Let's go inside.
Once inside, Kenda and Detective Walker rethink the theory that the shooting stemmed from a fight.
It is obvious there was a party going on. There's beer cans and malt liquor bottles and Solo cups all over the place. But the furniture is in order. Nothing is broken. There is no evidence of a struggle.
This must be where the EMTs found him.
And not a lot of blood. It's not good.
If he's not bleeding externally, it's because he's bleeding internally. That normally means major organ damage. That almost assuredly is fatal.
Hoping to get a clearer picture of how the shooting went down, Kenda and Walker turn their attention to one of the eyewitnesses.
Thank you for talking to us. I understand how upset you must be.
Lieutenant Kenda and I went to speak to Cheryl Harris, who was one of the persons at the party.
Did you know the victim?
Yeah, I mean, kinda. I just met him today.
According to Cheryl, she and her friend Crystal Trujillo were at the mall around lunchtime when Tim and his friend Arthur Jones sauntered up.
Hey, what's up, lady? What's going on?
Hi.
Hi, so what's your name?
Cheryl.
Cheryl.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
Hey, nice to meet you. I'm Tim.
Them two really thought of us as ladies, man, and they go to the mall all the time together and see who talk to the most girls and stuff like that.
Cheryl almost immediately had a crush on him.
What are you guys doing tonight?
I don't know why.
My boy's having a party and you should come.
Yeah, it's at my place, y'all motion.
Maybe.
Do you have a pen I can borrow?
Yeah.
There's something about this that seems so teenage boy dashing to me. He wrote his name and number on her hand.
So I hope to see you there.
Okay.
Right?
I will. Maybe.
Maybe?
Yeah.
All right.
Okay.
See y'all later.
Bye.
Keep this. You gonna get it back at the party? Yeah. All right.
What happened at the party?
We came to the party, and at first I couldn't find him.
There's lots of people there. Everybody's drinking, so they too drink.
Timothy didn't show up, much to Cheryl's happy pleasure. He kind of made a beeline for Cheryl. And so they were flirting to beat the band, and that was making things more fun.
The party was loud, and there was music, and people were talking and laughing and dancing and drinking. And she looked away for a moment from him. She hears a loud noise. She turned, and she sees the victim shudder and fell down directly to the floor.
Then I heard Arthur yelling. I couldn't believe it.
Did you see who shot Tim?
It happened so fast.
It's always possible for witnesses not to see the shooter in a noisy, crowded party.
Did Arthur see him?
Yeah, probably he was right there.
You know where we can find him?
Yeah, maybe. Probably he lives here. His roommate, Bobby Dickerson, is right over there. He was the one DJing.
No, thank you.
I already told you, man. Tim was my homeboy. I ain't had nothing to do with this.
Man, we're just trying to help. So why don't you help us out and tell us what happened?
All right, well, me and Art, we moved in together 3 days ago. So we decided to throw a little party.
They were very excited because this was the first apartment they'd had together, Bobby and Arthur.
He's busy being a disc jockey.
Now out of nowhere, we hear this bang.
He said he looked out the window and he observed two black males running wearing red coats and one of them carrying a gun.
Why would they want to hurt Timothy and not anyone else in this apartment? We have to know what happened, and we don't know that yet. We're at the scene of a shooting, but we don't know what happened here, but we're going to have to apply pressure to these people to get any semblance of the truth.
According to apartment resident Bobby Dickerson, the shooters were two African-American men in red jackets. But that's not all. According to Bobby, they purposefully targeted the victim, Timothy Pert, as part of a deadly gang dispute.
It was some damn Bloods. That's who it was. That's who did this, and that's the people who shot my homeboy.
Bobby was nervous telling us about the Bloods. The Bloods started in Compton, California as a protection gang against the Crips.
The Crips' color is blue. Their arch enemy are Bloods. That street gang wears red.
Looking at Bobby Dickerson and the other eyewitnesses, Kenda and Walker quickly put two and two together.
The kids all were wearing blue.
They've got a bandana sticking out of their pocket, or they got a blue baseball hat.
Everybody at the party was holding blue cups.
In the 90s, that was the time in Colorado Springs when the gang infestation was just getting started.
There were some guys that were coming in from the coasts, but there weren't many of them.
See any faces, any names?
I just seen red. I knew it was trouble.
Other witnesses from the party confirm Bobby's story that the Bloods were behind the shooting.
Do you know who these guys were?
Them slobs did.
slobs is a derogatory term for a blood member.
With the eyewitness statements in tow, Kenda and Walker's next move is to track down the two Bloods who are allegedly responsible for the shooting.
We are going to make some attempt to either find them or dispel this theory.
Would you come on and show us where you saw the shooters?
All right, man. They both walked out the back this way.
Bobby Dickerson says that's where they ran. We set a perimeter based on how far you can run, and we searched for guys that match that description.
Put out a description of the suspects. Let's also talk to neighbors. Fan out about 3 or 4 blocks.
The grass is high, the grass is wet. He says that's where they ran, but there isn't a mark in the grass.
Police don't find any footprints indicating the suspect's direction, but Kenda hopes there may be something else left of their trail.
When people commit shootings, they tend to throw guns away, so they dispose of the evidence.
Anything?
No, sir, we couldn't find a thing.
All right. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
No weapon is found. No anything is found. Mr. Dickerson's story is getting weaker by the second, and I explained that to him.
Look, Bobby. None of your downstairs neighbors saw anybody in red go by. The only people telling me that are you and your friends.
Yo, man, I'm telling you, it was the Marquette slobs.
Dickerson's demeanor is one of evasion. He doesn't want to talk to me.
All right, then. Any Bloods in particular have a beef with Timothy? Anyone, Bobby?
Yo, look, I told you everything, all right? What else do you want from me?
He's not any part of this, and he's as innocent as a driven snow. Well, probably not, Mr. Dickerson.
Take him to homicide. Put him in a box. Let's go.
As police wrap up the crime scene, Kenda is certain the story about the Bloods is bogus. But why would the partygoers lie? And what was the real motive behind the shooting?
In all of the interviews we've conducted so far, no one has suggested that there's any reason for Timothy to be hurt.
We could not determine that Timothy had any problems with any other person.
That just doesn't make sense to me.
Hoping the victim himself can provide the answers, Kenda and Walker head to the hospital. But the news isn't good.
Hi, we're here to check on the shooting victim.
I'm sorry, he didn't make it.
Take that in for a moment. You know, a 16-year-old boy, 16. He's never going to see 17.
Has his mother been notified?
Yeah, she's here. She's down in the waiting room. She's upset, but says she wants to talk to the police.
Thank you.
She was really torn up. My mother took up really hard. We was very close. Timothy was a loving person. He would take his shirt off his back for you. He was just like the heart of the family. It was really difficult on everybody, though.
Ma'am, we're very sorry for your loss. We're going to get to the bottom of this.
She went on to explain that Timothy is a nice kid. He does well in school, and he's a good son. He does have friends of his who claim to be Crip members, but he's not part of their lifestyle.
Can you think of anyone that did this to your son?
I know exactly what happened. I don't know, Timothy.
She tells us that earlier that night. She was on her way to work. Timothy asked her if he could go to the party.
Come on. It's Arthur and Bobby's new apartment. It's a big deal for
I
Arthur.
don't want them getting you into any kind of trouble.
But Mom, it's not like...
I said no, Timothy. When I came home from work, I seen policemen everywhere outside.
That's crazy.
And that's when Arthur came up to my window.
What is it?
I shot my bro.
Arthur comes up to her. He is crying. He is very distressed. And he says, I shot Timothy.
What are you
I'm so
saying?
sorry. I'm so sorry.
That is a critical moment. We've gone from guys in red coats to a grieving mother who names the shooter as Arthur Jones. It's his best friend who lives in the apartment where Timothy died.
She described to us that they were like brothers. They hung out together. They were inseparable.
Oh, my. It's not a gang thing now, is it?
What happened to Arthur?
He ran off. You gotta find that boy.
Do you know where he went?
He went to Sabin Junior High School. He's gonna kill himself, is what he said.
I'll put out a bolo for him.
We put out his name, his physical description. A bolo, be on the lookout. We want this individual for murder.
Detective Walker to dispatch.
He is armed and considered to be dangerous and possibly self-destructive.
We sent uniformed officers over to the school to check for Arthur, but he was not located.
With another young life on the line, Kenda heads to homicide to put the pressure on Arthur's roommate, Bobby Dickerson.
Bobby, I know it's not the Bloods. Arthur did it. And he told Tim's mom he's gonna kill himself.
I told you I don't know anything.
Look, Bobby, right now we're just trying to save Arthur's life. Now, where the hell is he?
Okay. Yo, all right, I can tell y'all some of the places he hangs out at.
You're not gonna tell us, you're gonna show us. Let's go.
We took Bobby and drove places to see if we could locate him.
Every place we've checked so far, we've had no result. No one has seen him, hadn't been there, or so they say.
Yo, right there. That girl. She's tight with Art. Pull over.
Bobby identifies the young woman as Sarah Barnes, a close friend of Arthur's who is walking home from a nightclub.
When we stopped, let Bobby out of the car, and he went to talk to this female.
Yo, hey, have you seen Arthur? I really need to talk to him.
When Bobby came back to the car, he had a tear in his eye.
And the news is exactly what no one wanted to hear.
The street says that Arthur's killed himself. As he said he would, he's dead. Is that what's really true? We have finally come to the level of truth. It's no longer a gang retaliation act that results in the death of our young victim. It's his best friend, Arthur Jones. His reaction to this is to confess to the victim's mother and then to threaten suicide.
Kenda and Detective J.D. Walker have searched high and low for Arthur. But when they encounter Sarah Barnes, she explains that word on the street is that Arthur has already killed himself.
She knows what she's heard. I'm not interested in what you've heard. I want to know what you know. So where is he dead?
How did you know that Arthur would have died?
Well, I was at Club 9.
Sarah says that she's in a bar, which we all know is a source of the absolute truth.
I was talking with this guy who heard that Arthur was going to kill himself. And then sometime later, he heard that he did.
So you heard it from a friend who heard it from someone else?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So what does that mean? Nothing. We will continue that search until we find him.
Later that night,
can you bring it to my office, please?
Kenda gets a surprising break from one of the witnesses at the party.
Lieutenant, this is Crystal.
All right, thank you.
Crystal Trujillo shows up at the station.
So, Crystal, you're the girl that went to the party with Cheryl Harris, right?
That's right.
So what brings you here?
I told my statement to the officers earlier tonight, but I sort of lied.
She apologized for not coming forward. She said she was scared. She didn't want to be labeled as a snitch.
It was just all that crib stuff. I didn't want those people to see me talking to the cops. That's why I came here.
She's not aware that these are wannabe kids and they don't engage in that behavior like the real gangs do, but nonetheless, she had a reason to not come forward immediately.
I saw the whole thing.
All right. Tell me from the beginning.
Cheryl and I go to this party, right?
She said that they got there about 9 o'clock. They were standing around. She said that Arthur walked up to her.
Hey girl, what you doing with that red dress on? Don't you know this a Chris party?
But I like this dress.
All right. Well, I'm just saying, because my boys might not appreciate it like I do.
I guess you'll just have to protect me.
All right, I like that.
She said Arthur had been drinking, but Arthur seemed like he's pretty intoxicated to her.
She continued to dance a little bit and kind of stand around and socialize. Arthur was facing Tim, and they were kind of playing around, like play slapping, play pushing.
What's up with that red?
Hey, look, man, don't worry about my girl, all right? I know she a blood or not, but don't be causing her no problems, all right?
I don't know about that.
There was no argument, there was no dispute. They were just playfully interacting with each other.
You're not gonna do nothing if I do.
I ain't, man. Man, you ain't so tough, man.
I'm scared of you. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, got this bad baby right here, you know what I'm saying?
All of a sudden, Arthur had this gun out.
You don't even know what to do with it.
She saw Arthur with a gun and start just kind of screwing around with it.
I ain't worried about you.
And he's laughing and twirling the gun around his hand, and boom.
And his friend just went down. And Tim was lying there, and he wasn't moving.
Arthur was down there with him and screaming.
Oh, man, Tim, get up, man.
Arthur is totally panic-stricken, and then he runs off.
Get out of here!
Wake up, man.
Get out of here!
Bro, wake up.
We think Bobby was the one that initiated the Bloods, committed this crime.
When the police show up, don't nobody mention Art's name, all right?
They know Arthur Jones. They want to protect him from the police. So lay this off on some Mr. X that ran off into the darkness, rather than Arthur Jones.
It doesn't matter, sadly, that it was an accident. You don't get a do-over.
The reckless behavior, it made it even more tragic that it took this life. They're really good friends. They're the best of friends.
They'd been really good friends for a long time, and when Arthur said, "No, I killed my bro," he was being serious. They were like brothers.
Everyone in patrol, everyone in investigations is beating the bushes for Arthur Jones. He says he's going to kill himself.
We already have a young teenager that is deceased. What we don't want is 2 lives to be lost.
Thankfully, the next morning, the search for Arthur Jones ends peacefully.
Happily, Arthur did have an aunt and uncle that stopped him from ending his own life.
It took 3 hours for the aunt and uncle to talk to Arthur to get him to turn himself in.
On August 28, 1993, Arthur Jones pleads guilty to criminally negligent homicide and is sentenced to 2 years in prison.
I forgive him. He didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. I know it was.
For the rest of his days, he will think about killing his best friend. Timothy should still be with us, but he's not. That in itself is worse punishment than anything a court could provide.
Coming up, a case that seems open and shut is anything but.
He didn't witness it, so the obvious question for this caller is, how did you know this was a suicide?
It's early morning, and Lt.Joe Kenda is called to a residence on the west side of town.
Detective J.D. Walker was at the scene.
So what we got? Well, they're saying it's a suicide.
He informs me that patrol was summoned to this address as the investigation of a suicide.
Who's the victim?
William Grudowski was 32.
The police respond to all reports of death to determine method and manner.
He was married to Holly, his wife, who was only 19. Here's an older man married to a fairly young girl.
I think that there was a father figure between William Grudowski and Holly Grudowski.
Let's take a look.
Inside, Kenda and Walker find Jay Perez, the Grudowski's roommate and the man who called 911.
I'd like to ask you a few questions if you don't mind.
Sure.
He said Bill and Holly Grudowski only lived there about 2 to 3 weeks. They were living there to help Jay with his rent.
Can you walk us through what happened this morning?
Well, I was awakened by some noises. Sounded like muffled yelling.
He didn't witness it. He is reporting what Holly said, that her husband had killed himself. So that's the story we have at this particular moment.
How long have they been married?
Not long, I think about a year.
Do you know where she is now?
I don't know. I just hope you find her soon. She's just a kid, and she sounded completely freaked out.
And real death, not movie death, real death is ugly. It's beyond ugly. So for her to act out of traumatization and flee from this would be relatively normal.
What do you know about Bill? Was he depressed?
I haven't known him all that long. I just know the guy had a bad coke habit. I think he was kinda at the end of his rope.
He is someone who has had a shady past. He's had a lot of run-ins with the law.
He's a minor drug dealer, just sells small amounts of cocaine and ekes out some money from that.
Holly and Bill didn't even have a car. They didn't have a place to live. They basically were looking for handouts.
It's, about a month ago, Bill got worried. He thought the cops were gonna bust him.
William uses cocaine. Cocaine induces paranoia. William tells his wife, Holly, if they catch him with this much product, he's going to jail for a long time.
I'm not going back to prison again, man. No way.
Holly decides to resolve this threat by taking the cocaine and flushing it down the toilet. Brilliant.
But Polly didn't fully understand the ramifications of her actions.
It was not her property to flush. The drug supplier supplies the drugs. As Bill deals out that cocaine, he pays back the drug supplier.
What did you just do?
I was trying to help.
What the hell were you thinking?
But you said the cops.
The cops! Where do you think we're gonna get the money to pay my guy back? I'm a dead man. I'm a dead man!
Drug suppliers do not sue you. They do not send you a nasty letter. They come to where you live and they fill you full of bullets. William knows it. Now the lovely Holly has almost guaranteed his murder.
They needed to lay low because they knew that people would be out looking for them.
After learning of Bill's predicament, Lieutenant Kenda and Detective Walker can see why he might have wanted to end it all.
If all of this stuff is piling up on Bill Grudowski, he knows that the only way he's going to get out of this is hit rock bottom. And rock bottom could be suicide.
Well, I appreciate your help. There'll be an officer in to talk to you in a minute.
Inside the guest room, Kenda and Walker encounter the lifeless body of Bill Grudowski.
We see him lying on his back.
Damn. It's a hell of a way to kill yourself.
We also see a sawed-off shotgun that's laying next to him.
There's blood everywhere. It's on the furniture. It's on the carpet. They see a big gaping hole in his chest. There's no doubt that he's been shot.
But when Kenda and Walker take a closer look, they get a few surprises.
We roll the body over, and when we do that, a pistol falls out of the inside breast pocket.
Hey, look at that. That's just weird.
Why would Bill Kradowski shoot himself with a sawed-off shotgun and not the pistol that he had in his pocket?
It was a big red flag to them because they thought, this just doesn't make sense.
But the biggest red flag of all comes when they get a look at Bill's back.
They see that he was actually shot in the back.
You would expect the entrance wound to be in the chest.
He has been shot at extremely close range between his shoulder blades with a shotgun. And unless he works for Cirque du Soleil, he didn't do that. This isn't a suicide, it's a murder.
Holly was in the bedroom at the time that Bill Kradowski was shot. We needed to find Holly.
Where is the charming Mrs. Kradowski? Because she ain't here right now.
Originally, the call came in that a person in this apartment had taken his own life. Our examination of the scene indicates that that is not the case.
Suicides have a certain look, and this ain't it.
Jay heard a bang, and then she leaves the residence. Because Holly was in the bedroom at the time that Bill Kradowski was shot, we needed to find Holly.
People who commit a crime, they have a very great tendency to run away. So now the step is find her.
But before the homicide investigation gets off the ground, a man named Terry Reynolds reaches out with information.
I got some information about what happened at the house today.
It's extremely rare in murder cases to have an eyewitness announce their presence and say, I know what happened here.
You were there this morning?
Yeah. Okay, so it's early, it's 5 a.m. Bill says he needs a ride somewhere.
So Terry tells us that he actually goes and picks up Bill, and they go to a location in the downtown area called Rich Springs.
Hey man, we're here for a minute. Go ahead.
Terry said that he didn't see the drugs, but he assumed that Bill was buying cocaine.
Thanks for the ride, man. Oh, you want? Hey, one favor. When we get back to your place, can I take a piss? The racehorse. They drank way too much coffee this morning. That cool? Sure, man.
He was in the bathroom when he hears a loud bang.
He finally comes out of the bathroom. He finds Holly in the living room.
Did what? Who did what?
Bill, he shot himself. Listen, you have a car, right?
Yeah.
I can't be here, so can you help me?
Yeah.
Please just...
Yeah, come on.
Okay,
yeah.
Terry says they drive off. While they're driving, she's very upset.
She's crying, she's hysterical. He stops at a red light.
And I'm like, look, we gotta tell the police. And she runs out the car.
Mr. Reynolds seems completely believable. I have no reason to believe he's involved in this.
Terry, I saw the body. Bill didn't commit suicide. He was murdered.
He was shocked.
Are you kidding?
No, I don't kid about things like that.
Can you think of any reason why Holly would decide to murder her husband?
It wasn't a happy marriage or anything, but Bill had a temper and that was it.
I get a complete drift from Mr. Reynolds, and he knows more than he's telling me.
Kenda decides the best way to crack that nut is to let Terry go, with a nudge to his conscience.
Well, Terry, I want to thank you for coming forward. I can tell you're someone that knows what's right is right. When you decide you want to tell me everything, just give me a call.
Dude, I told you everything I know.
Everything. Bye, Terry.
You think he'll call?
Well, if he doesn't, maybe I'll throw his ass in jail.
While Kenda heads back to the office, Detective Walker reaches out to Bill's relatives to learn more about his marriage to Holly.
I always felt really bad for Holly.
Bill's family, and I love him, but he was not good to her.
Holly was probably afraid of Bill. He was somebody who was very controlling over her, but yet they lived this lifestyle that put them in harm's way.
A short time later, Kenda gets a visit from a familiar face.
Terry. I wasn't completely honest up front. I apologize. Just wanted to come and get my story straight, and I want to come clean about everything I know.
He apparently took what I said to him to heart.
Have a seat.
He tells police that Holly did not, in fact, jump out of the car and run into the night, never to be seen again.
I actually drove her to a safe place.
Terry tells police he wanted to take her somewhere they could figure out what to do.
And where is Holly?
So he took her to a friend's house.
And what's his friend's name?
His name's Matt Carr.
So he went to the address provided. And Mr. Carr resided in a trailer park. That's where he dropped her off.
Yes.
What was the Colorado Springs Police Department?
We asked him if he knew where Holly Gradowski was.
She's, in fact, asleep on the couch.
What happened when she got here?
She told me she was in a lot of trouble and that she was going to go to jail for a long time. She just went over to the couch and that was that.
She just basically passed out.
Yeah, I really felt sorry for her.
Mind if we come in?
Yeah, sure.
Matt Carr accepted Holly as a guest because he knew William Gradowski did an awful lot of cocaine, that he was abusive to Holly verbally and physically.
It's time to speak with Holly face to face.
Come on, get up. Come on, get up, sit up.
Is Bill dead?
Yes. Yes, he is.
She says she was tired of running, and she wasn't running anymore.
Holly tells police that before Bill and Terry had left, she and Bill had had a very volatile fight.
I'm tired of looking at you, bitch. You better hope I don't kill you when I get back.
She said that when her husband left, he had a gun on him in his breast pocket.
Well, in Holly's mind, she's very afraid of this person. She thinks that, yeah, he's really capable of that, that when he gets back, if I'm not gone, I need to protect myself.
He told me to leave, but I don't have anywhere to go.
And sure enough, when he gets back and he sees Holly is there,
I told you I was sick of seeing you.
They get into a big fight.
She said that she was sitting on the bed in their bedroom with a shotgun next to her right leg. She said she knew that he was going to beat her. She didn't give him a chance.
Always the same thing, over and over. You think I'm joking about killing you?
She felt it was necessary to kill him to defend herself.
It's not uncommon for an abused spouse to finally get to the point where they can't take it anymore.
Stand up. You're under arrest for murder. Come on.
Holly Grudowski was charged with first-degree murder with deliberation.
At trial, Holly pleads guilty to manslaughter and is sentenced to 15 years in prison. Then in 1999, 2 years into her sentence, Holly Grudowski is granted a reprieve.
Governor Roy Romer instituted a clemency program, and it involved murder, specifically if it involved an abusive spouse situation. So it's almost like justified homicide.
There are certain relationships that are poisonous by their nature. It rarely ends well.
They still talk about that night like a bad dream London never woke up from, a night frozen somewhere between the orange glow of street lamps and the thin drizzle on cracked pavements, when a young woman stepped off a bus in 1985 and simply vanished into the dark. No thunderclap, no scream echoing down the alley, no dramatic chase through the fog, just footsteps, a faded umbrella, and a city that swallowed her whole. For decades, it was just another headline that aged into yellow paper, young woman missing after night out. But buried beneath the ink and dust was something colder, sharper, the kind of story that refuses to stay dead. A cold case, a name tucked away in old police files, a ghost still wandering the streets of London. Her name was Emma Caldwell, 22, bright, restless, carrying a cheap leather bag with a cracked strap and a notebook filled with things she wanted to do before she turned 30. She worked days at a cramped bookshop near Charing Cross and took night classes in journalism, writing articles the local papers never printed, but that didn't stop her. She liked to walk home late. She said it helped her think, helped her write, helped her breathe when the city got too loud. That night, a Friday in October 1985, she left a cramped pub near Soho just after 11:30 p.m., laughing off the cold, promising friends she'd call when she got home. She never did. The CCTV systems we take for granted now didn't exist in the same way back then. No high-definition footage, no digital timelines, no endless trail of data, just a few grainy security cameras outside banks and shops, black and white ghosts, flickering on dusty monitors, if they were working at all. Detectives in heavy overcoats walked streets slick with rain, knocked on doors, questioned barmen, taxi drivers, night workers. They wrote everything by hand, scribbling notes on soggy pads, piecing together the last known movements of a woman who seemed to vanish between one breath and the next. The last confirmed sighting. A bus stop on a main road, dim streetlight flickering, a double-decker pulling away, Emma standing under the orange glow, her umbrella tilted against the drizzle. After that, nothing. Not a sound. Not a trace. The city didn't stop for Emma. London never stops. Morning came as it always did, gray, unbothered, the rush of commuters pushing through stations, the hiss of buses, the rumble of trains underfoot. A missing person report was filed by her roommate when Emma didn't come home, when her bed stayed cold, when the small cactus she kept on the windowsill sat in the same spot of weak light, waiting. The first officers to read the report frowned but didn't panic. Adults disappear all the time, they said. People drink too much, sleep at someone else's place, forget to call, give it a day. Maybe 2, but her roommate didn't like the way that sounded. She knew Emma, and Emma always called. By day 3, the tone inside the station shifted. Now her name was written on a whiteboard. Now there were printouts of her student ID photo pinned to corkboards, a grainy image of a young woman with wide, serious eyes and a half smile, the kind of smile that never imagined it would end up on the evening news. Flyers appeared on lampposts and shop windows. Missing, have you seen Emma? People glanced at them on their way to work and looked away just as quickly. The city was busy, crowded with its own problems, but the regular customers at the bookshop noticed when her side of the counter stayed empty. The professor at her night class noticed when her chair remained untouched, the notes on her desk from last week still neatly stacked. Detectives traced her route that night step by step, as if they could walk her back into existence. The pub in Soho, the busy pavement, the bus ride heading south, the stop where she stepped down into the drizzle. One driver vaguely remembered her maybe. A young woman with dark hair and a long coat. Or was that another night? Another girl. Details blurred. Memories in a big city don't stay clean for long. They checked the phone boxes along the street. No calls to her home, no last-minute messages. Her bank card lay untouched, her small amount of cash stayed unspent. It was as if the world simply forgot to record her last minutes. Then came the first strange clue, the kind detectives never admit rattles them. An anonymous call to the station, a man's voice, low, distorted through a payphone line, saying he'd seen a woman matching Emma's description getting into a dark car near the bus stop. No plates, no make, just dark, maybe black or blue, 4 doors, older model. The caller wouldn't give his name. He hung up before they could press him. One more shadow added to an already dark street. Was he a witness? A liar? Something worse? The officers logged the call, added it to the file, underlined it. A car. A 4-door ghost drifting along the edge of the case. The press arrived like they always do when the word missing hangs in the air too long. Reporters camped outside the small flat Emma shared with her roommate, cameras pointed at the door, microphones extended like weapons. Headlines began to sharpen. Young woman vanishes in night. Student missing after London bus ride. The words mysterious disappearance appeared on screens and front pages, the kind of phrase that sells papers and drains color from faces. Emma's parents, who lived outside the city, arrived to see their daughter's photo everywhere, but not their daughter. They stood in front of cameras, begging anyone who knew anything to come forward, their voices trembling, their eyes blank from too many sleepless nights. The investigation widened. Police checked hospitals, hostels, morgues. They drained canals, combed through parks, searched abandoned warehouses along forgotten streets where the city's glow didn't quite reach. Door to door, block by block, they asked the same questions in 100 different stairwells that smelled of damp carpet and cigarette smoke. Had anyone seen a young woman that night? Had anyone heard a scream, an argument, a car door slamming? Sometimes people thought they remembered something, a figure in a coat, a car slowing down, a shape in the rain. But nothing held. Nothing clicked into place with the satisfying certainty investigators needed. Days became weeks. The flyers curled at the edges and peeled off poles in the damp air. The news cycle moved on, leaving the case to slide from headline to footnote to nothing at all. Inside the station, the whiteboard changed. New names appeared, new crimes, new urgencies. Emma's stayed there, but the marker lines grew faint, overwritten by fresher ink. Some detectives still thought about her on the way home, staring out at the city lights through rain-streaked windows, wondering where she had gone, what they had missed. Others were transferred, reassigned, pulled into bigger, louder cases. London didn't slow down. Neither did crime. And in the middle of it all, a single missing person file slid slowly towards the back of the cabinet. But there was one officer who refused to let it fade completely, an older detective named Harris, the kind of man who kept his ties too tight and his notebooks too full. He'd sat across from Emma's parents, seen the way her mother twisted a faded bracelet around her wrist, an old gift from her daughter. He'd heard the way her father's voice broke halfway through a sentence and never quite recovered. Harris didn't believe people simply vanished. Not in his city, not without someone seeing, knowing, hiding something. He kept a copy of her file on his own shelf, among his most stubborn ghosts. Every few months, when paperwork slowed and the noise of newer cases quieted for a moment, he would pull it down, flip through the pages, stare at the last known photo of Emma, and ask the same question: what happened to you? As years passed, the case picked up a new label, cold and official. Cold case, they called it now. Stored in boxes with other unfinished stories, unsolved murders, unexplained disappearances, crimes that had slipped too far past the edge of fresh memory. In training rooms, they told new recruits that some cases never close, that sometimes justice is just a word you say to make the families feel less alone. But out there, in the city Emma once walked through at night, the unanswered questions didn't vanish. They lingered in the corners of pubs where old-timers swapped stories, in the quiet pauses of radio shows that occasionally mentioned her name, in the whispered warnings to young women heading home: don't walk alone, don't trust the dark, don't end up like that girl from '85. Emma's disappearance soaked into the concrete of London in ways nobody could quite measure. Neighbors who barely knew her suddenly remembered seeing her carry groceries up the stairs, holding the door for elderly tenants, smiling politely in the lift. Her classmates swapped half-remembered conversations about her dream of becoming an investigative reporter, of wanting to chase stories, not be one. The bookshop kept her name tag in a drawer behind the counter, a small piece of plastic no one could bring themselves to throw away. The city forgot a lot of things as the years rolled on. Faces, names, scandals, but somewhere in the background noise, Emma's case kept humming, a low, persistent note of unfinished business. And then time did what it always does. It hardened the edges of the story into a kind of urban legend. Remember that girl who disappeared, the one from '85? People would ask it over pints on late-night walks in quiet kitchens with the news murmuring in the background. Some swore they'd known someone who knew her. Others claimed the case was linked to a string of other disappearances, that there was a pattern nobody had seen, that London had a predator who slipped through cracks and hid behind polite smiles. None of it was proven. All of it added another layer of mystery to a file already heavy with speculation. What no one knew, not Emma's family, not the neighbors who still glanced nervously down the street at night, not the detectives who had long since retired or moved on, was that buried deep in that cold case file was something small, something missed, something that shouldn't have been ignored. A line of handwriting half smudged by rain, a description too vague to seem important, a fragment of a license plate number scribbled in the margin of a notebook and never followed up. A strange clue waiting patiently in the dark, the kind that years later would crack open the silence and turn an old missing person poster into the first domino in a chain of revelations nobody saw coming. The case wasn't solved, not yet. But somewhere, quietly, the story was shifting, the past beginning to stir, and London, without knowing it, was standing on the edge of a secret that had been waiting since 1985 to finally come out of the shadows. It starts, like so many things in modern policing, with a scan. Not a dramatic tip-off, not a prison confession, not a stranger walking into a station with shaking hands. Just a slow, methodical uploading of old paper into new machines, as a police archivist feeds brittle files into a scanner and watches Emma Caldwell's face flicker onto a screen for the first time in decades. London has changed. The air smells different, the skyline is sharper, cameras hang on every corner like glass eyes. But in this fluorescent-lit room in the basement of a central police building, the past is being dragged, page by page, into the present. The cold case review unit is small, tucked behind a corridor that always seems slightly too quiet. They don't get the sirens or the rolling news teams. They get cardboard boxes, dust, and questions nobody could answer when the paper was still fresh. Today, Detective Inspector Alex Ward stands over one of those boxes, flipping through files that smell of nicotine and old rain. He's in his early 40s, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who looks like he stopped sleeping properly years ago but still hasn't slowed down. His headphones sit crooked around his neck, a coffee gone cold next to his elbow, forgotten. On his desk, in the middle of the organized chaos of old crimes, is a name written in thick black pen, Emma Caldwell. Ward didn't work this case back then. In 1985, he was a child, more worried about football stickers and schoolyard politics than the headlines his parents tried to hide from him. But he remembers the name, faintly. A missing girl. A photograph on the news, her eyes too alive for the word disappeared that flashed under her face. He remembers the way his mom locked the windows after that, the way his dad started picking him up from school instead of letting him walk home alone. The fear that leaks from one family into another, filling streets, tightening routines. Now he looks at that same photo, scanned and digital, and feels something tighten in his chest. The unit has been instructed to prioritize unsolved cases that might benefit from new technology, DNA databases, enhanced image analysis, cross-referencing systems that can spot patterns no human brain ever had time to piece together, old murders, unidentified remains, long ago assaults with evidence sitting silent in sealed bags. Emma's file shouldn't have been a priority, no body ever found, no confirmed crime scene. Technically, officially, it's still a missing persons case, not a murder. But when Ward picks up the file, something about it feels wrong, thin, too thin for someone who simply vanished. Too many unknowns scribbled in margins, too many phrases like no further leads and no credible witnesses. He starts to read. The first report, the roommate's statement. The description of the night out in Soho, the bus, the last sighting at the stop, the anonymous call about a dark car, the notes about possible sightings that came to nothing. He sees the names of officers long retired, old phone numbers, outdated procedures, a map still clipped inside, showing the route from the pub to the bus stop, marked with red pen, another showing her usual walk home from the bus stop to her building. The distance between the 2 points is painfully small, the gap where she disappeared smaller still. Cold cases are often about noise. Too much of it. Too many false leads, too many theories. But this file feels quiet, stripped, like something had been taken away long before it arrived on his desk. Ward frowns, flips to the back. There, on the very last page, is a loose photocopy that doesn't quite fit. The edge is off. The quality is worse. It's a scan of a handwritten note, hurriedly scribbled. No heading, no reference number. Just a date, a time, and a short description of a man who'd come forward briefly on the second week after Emma disappeared. A bystander who thought he might have seen a car pulled up on a side street near the bus stop, lights off, engine running. The witness mentioned hearing a door close, a muffled sound, and catching a blur of movement in his peripheral vision. In the margin, a detective's note, cramped and rushed. Follow up, witness unreliable, possibly intoxicated, no plate taken, no clear ID, low priority. Ward stares at the words. Low priority. He looks at the time of the note, the location, the description of the car. Dark sedan, 4 doors, older model. The same phrasing as the anonymous call. Same night, same hour. 2 separate mentions of a dark car waiting in the shadows, both gently nudged to the edge of the investigation and left there to rot. One anonymous, one written off as unreliable. He feels a flicker, not proof, not even a solid lead. Just that thin crack in the wall of silence cold case detectives live for. Ward calls over a junior analyst, a quick-thinking woman in her late 20s named Mia Clark, fingers stained with highlighter ink, hair tied in an impatient knot. She's fluent in databases, old map archives, and the awkward silences of grieving families. He hands her the photocopy and the note about the anonymous call. I want you to overlay these locations on a period-accurate street map, he tells her. Not current London, 1985 London. Before the road changes, before the new buildings, I want to see exactly where that car could have been parked. She nods, already moving, the itch of a new puzzle lighting up her face. Outside, the city moves on. Millions of lives unfolding at once, commuters glancing at their phones, kids glued to screens, tourists taking photos of monuments that weren't even there when Emma disappeared. In the cold case unit, time works differently. It stops, it loops, it rewinds. Ward leans back in his chair and closes his eyes for a second, building the scene in his head like a film. October 1985, late. Rain. Bus pulls away. A young woman steps under a sputtering street lamp with her umbrella. A dark car waiting nearby, engine idling. Lights off. Driver watching. Waiting. He opens his eyes and reaches for the old witness list. There were more people at that bus stop. A nurse coming off a late shift. A man in a brown coat walking his dog. A teenager in a denim jacket with headphones on. Most of them were interviewed. Most of them didn't see anything unusual, but these statements were taken in the first few days, when the assumption was still late return home, not predator hunting in the dark. Questions shape answers. He wonders what they weren't asked. Hours later, Clark returns, a map spread across her tablet. She's dug up an old street layout, overlaid it with the probable line of sight from the bus stop, plus the side streets listed in the original file. She's highlighted a narrow lane that used to cut behind a row of buildings, half hidden from the main road by a line of overgrown hedges back then. It doesn't exist anymore. It's a glass office block now, a polished surface where something messy once lived. If the car was parked here, she says, pointing, someone at the bus stop might have seen just the corner of it, enough to know it was there, not enough to make out the plate. The anonymous caller and that unreliable witness, they might have been describing the same vehicle from slightly different angles. Ward feels that flicker again, stronger now. Run the old traffic records, he says. Any cars reported stolen in that area around that time. Dark, 4-door, anything that matches. And cross-check with any serious offenses logged within a year. This doesn't feel like a one-off. They dig. Hours become days. Reports get pulled from storage, licenses, old theft logs, historical crime data crawls across screens. For a while, it feels like the usual slog. Nothing but numbers, scattered incidents, fragments of other tragedies. Then Clark freezes. Sir, you need to see this. On her monitor is a list from late 1985, a stolen vehicle report from a few days before Emma disappeared. Dark blue Ford Sierra, 4-door, older model, taken from a car park less than a mile from her usual bus route, never recovered. The report is thin, barely a page. The owner was questioned and dismissed as uninvolved. The car just vanished. A lot of cars were stolen back then, Ward says, but his voice is tight. He leans closer. What's the date again? She taps the screen, zooms in. The theft was logged 4 days before Emma went missing. And the owner? He's an ordinary man on paper. Married, 2 kids, worked in a warehouse, no record. Still, Ward flags him, then runs his name through every system they have, old and new. The man is clean. No violent crime, no suspicious associations, just a stolen car he never got back. So maybe the car wasn't the point, Clark murmurs. Maybe it was the tool. They keep going. Next, they pull any case from the mid to late 80s involving abductions attempted or completed where a vehicle was mentioned but never identified. A woman grabbed near a station but managed to escape. Another pulled towards a car door but screamed loud enough to scare the attacker off. In two separate reports filed months apart, the victims describe a dark saloon with a worn back seat, the smell of stale cigarettes, a man's rough hand closing over their mouth. No plates, no clear view of the driver's face. Back then, the incidents were treated as isolated. Scary, yes. Serious, yes. But not connected. Different boroughs, different detectives, no digital system to connect the dots. No one saw the pattern. Or if they did, it never made it into the right file. Now, in this quiet room, the pattern begins to show itself. Ward pins Emma's photo above his desk. Next to it, smaller, the faces of those other women, grainy black and white passport-style images from the 80s, hair and clothing dated but fear in their eyes timeless. Victims who survived, victims who didn't, victims who never got answers. He draws lines between them not because he's sure yet, but because he's learned to respect that feeling in his gut when cases whisper to each other across the years. He knows he's walking a thin line. Cold case detectives can't afford to fall in love with theories. They have to marry facts. But something about the timing, the stolen car, the location, the quiet mishandling of those early tips about a dark vehicle, it all feels too tightly coiled to be coincidence. He opens a new file on the system. Caldwell, Emma, Case Review 2020. And in the notes he writes, potential vehicle-linked offender, investigate connection to other attempted abductions, possibility of mobile offender operating near bus routes late at night. Original investigation may have underestimated risk profile. It's a calm, clinical sentence. It doesn't say what he really thinks. That someone out there used to cruise the edges of London's night, hunting. That the city might have had a predator hiding in plain sight while people read headlines about a missing student and locked their doors, never knowing the driver who passed them on the wet streets was the reason she never came home. Meanwhile, outside police walls, life goes on, but little ripples begin to spread, because cold cases don't only live in archives, they live in people. And whenever police reopen an old file, the past has a way of feeling it. Emma's mother is older now, hair thinner, hands slower, but her memory of 1985 is razor sharp. She doesn't get a phone call, not yet, but she feels the storm before it breaks. She has lived with silence for so long that any shift in the air scares her. She still keeps Emma's room almost exactly as it was, in the house outside London they moved back to after the city became unbearable. The posters on the wall are faded, the books on the shelf smell of dust, the cassette tapes on the dresser are relics from another life. Sometimes she sits on the edge of that bed and talks to the empty space where her daughter should be, telling her about news stories, neighbors, the changing world, asking her the same question the detectives ask in their own way. Where did you go? In another flat, in another part of the city, a man in his late 50s watches the news without really seeing it, the sound turned down low. He lives alone. No photos on the walls, no personal clutter, just order, routine. He's gotten very good at living quietly, at not attracting attention, at blending into whatever background he finds himself in. He thinks the past is done with him. He thinks the city has forgotten. But somewhere deep in the digital veins of London, old data is waking up, lines are connecting, systems are blinking to life with patterns no one had time to see before. Back in the cold case unit, Clark looks up from her screen, her face pale, eyes fixed on a match that shouldn't exist. A name, a partial print, a connection between a decades-old assault and a more recent unsolved offense. The same area, the same style. A faint echo of the dark car, buried in the wording of an old statement. She calls Ward over. He leans down, reads. The room feels colder. They don't know it yet, not fully, but they are about to drag something ugly into the light, something that's been hiding behind bad lighting, missing paperwork, and old-fashioned assumptions. A shadow that walked right through 1985, right past Emma at that bus stop, and kept moving. The cold case isn't solved, not yet, but the dead still have their ways of speaking, and in the heart of London, through the hum of servers and the flicker of old maps coming alive again, the story of a young woman who vanished in the drizzle is beginning at last to fight its way back to the surface. The match isn't dramatic. No flashing red warning, no siren blaring from the computer. Just a quiet little line on a screen, a green tick beside a reference number that hasn't meant anything to anyone in over 3 decades. Clark stares at it for a few seconds, the way you stare at something your brain hasn't quite agreed to believe yet. An old sexual assault kit logged in 1986, collected from a woman dragged into a car near a dimly lit side street not far from the same bus route Emma used. The original case never went anywhere. The evidence sat in storage, sealed, forgotten. But someone, at some point in the last few years, had the sense, or the funding, to process that kit and upload the DNA profile into the national database. Now, years late, the system has finally had something to say. "Sir," Clark says. her voice somehow too loud and too quiet at the same time in the chilled hum of the unit. "You need to look at this, properly." Ward crosses the room, coffee in hand, eyes gritty from too many hours of staring at text that refuses to change. He glances at the screen, ready for another dead end, another partial only, no match, another cruel little almost. But this isn't that. The screen shows a link, an identical DNA profile found at two separate scenes, the 1986 assault, and something much more recent, a break-in reported just 3 years earlier, a woman living alone in a flat near Brixton, woken by the sound of someone at her door. The lock had been tampered with, but she'd scared the intruder off by shouting before he made it inside. Forensics had lifted a partial touch DNA profile from the outer door handle. At the time, it led nowhere. Now, that partial profile is lighting up against an old, complete profile from a time when DNA was still science fiction to most detectives. One man, two scenes, 30-plus years apart. Ward feels the shift inside his chest, that cold, sharp click when a random shape suddenly belongs to a bigger picture. He scrolls down. There's a note in the more recent file. No identified suspect, no known associate, no follow-up, just another minor crime in a city full of them, logged and filed and overshadowed by louder violence. But the system doesn't care about narrative or drama, it cares about numbers. The same genetic fingerprint is now tying together an attempted break-in and a decades-old assault that shares geography, method, and that ever-present detail. A dark saloon car, engine idling, hand-reaching, door slamming. He doesn't say, "This is him." Cold case work has taught him the danger of those words, but his fingers tighten around the edge of Clark's desk. "Pull everything we have on that 1986 victim," he says, "and the recent one. I want their full statements, any addenda, any follow-up notes that got buried. If there's DNA, there might have been something else." Clark nods, already pulling files down from digital shelves and calling up scanned images of handwritten reports. The 1986 victim's name is Ruth Davies, 23 at the time. She'd been walking home from a late shift at a restaurant when a car slowed alongside her. A man's voice offering a lift. She'd shaken her head and kept moving. The car had pulled ahead, turned into a side street, disappeared. She'd barely had time to think before she heard footsteps pounding behind her. A hand on her arm, another clamping over her mouth, the smell of cigarette smoke and sweat filling her nose. The report notes that she couldn't identify the man. Dark hair, maybe. Medium build. Average height. The kind of description that fits half the city. He'd forced her into the back seat. That's where the assault happened. A cramped back seat, the door pulled shut, rain drumming against the roof. She managed to scratch him at some point, his face or his neck, she wasn't sure. She'd also grabbed at something, anything, and her hand had closed around a cigarette butt in the ashtray, crushing it into the upholstery in blind panic. Back then it was just a detail. Now Ward knows that's probably where they got the original DNA years later, when the kit was finally processed. Ruth reported the attack immediately. She went to hospital, she gave a statement, she did everything survivors are told to do. And the system thanked her by failing. No suspect, no arrest. She moved out of London within the year. The case went cold. The more recent victim, 2017, is listed as Naomi Blake, 39. She'd been alone when someone tried her door in the middle of the night. At first she thought it was a neighbor, drunk and at the wrong flat. Then she heard the key turn in the lock. A key that shouldn't have existed. Her breath froze. She stepped quietly towards the door, saw the handle turn slowly, deliberately. Instinct took over she didn't know she had. She slammed her palm against the wood and shouted. A raw, wordless sound that ripped through the silence. The handle jerked. She heard footsteps retreating fast down the corridor. Forensics said the door showed signs of having been worked on before that night. Tiny scratches near the lock. Possibly someone testing it. Coming back, trying again. The way he escalates, then disappears, then tries again, Clark mutters, more to herself than anyone. Like he learned to be careful, then complacent, then careful again. Ward thinks of the unseen man in the Part 2 flat, watching TV with the sound down, living a quiet life. He thinks of patterns that stretch across years, of predators who don't stop, they just slow down, adapt, change routes, change cars, change faces. Run familial searches on this profile, he says. Look for relatives, anyone in the system who might be a partial match, and flag both these women. I want to talk to them, if they're willing. The email to Naomi is straightforward. She's local, she has an address, a phone number. The contact for Ruth is buried under layers of old paper trail. Last known address, last known job. Clark and another officer chase it down, step by patient step, until they find a phone number that still rings. In the meantime, Ward does something he's been putting off. He calls the retired detective. Harris lives in a small house on the edge of the city now, a place where the nights are quieter and the sky, on good days, remembers how to be dark. He answers the phone on the third ring, his voice rougher, older, but still carrying that same clipped precision Ward remembers from old recordings. This is Harris. Sir, it's D.I. Alex Ward, cold case review. I'm looking at one of your old files, the Caldwell case, 1985. A pause, not long, but thick. Ward hears the faint creak of a chair, the ghost of a sigh. I wondered when that one would come back, Harris says. If it ever would. Ward explains carefully what they've found so far. The dark car, the witness notes, the stolen Ford, the DNA link between the 1986 assault and the 2017 door handle. He keeps his voice measured, factual, but there's an undercurrent he can't quite hide. I know you followed up what you could, Ward says. I can see the work in the file. But digital systems weren't what they are now. Patterns weren't as easy to see. We're seeing them. They weren't easy, Harris corrects quietly. They were damn near impossible. But that doesn't mean they weren't there. Another small pause. You think your mystery driver took that girl in '85? I think we'd be stupid not to seriously consider it, Ward answers. Same area, same kind of approach, same shadow in a dark car. And now we have a DNA profile for something that looks like the same type of offender, operating in the same hunting ground, overlapping timelines. Harris exhales slowly, a sound like a drawer opening on rusty runners. There was something about that case, he says. It never sat right, too quiet, too clean, no body, no scene, no blood in the street. The city just swallowed her. I always thought if we could find the car, we'd find something. He doesn't finish the sentence, he doesn't have to. Do you remember anything that didn't make the file? Ward presses gently. Conversations, feelings, someone who didn't seem right. Even if you couldn't prove it. There's another silence, and Ward almost thinks the line has dropped. Then there was a man, Harris says slowly. We looked at him briefly, not as a suspect officially, more as a person of interest who never quite became one. He worked nights back then, maintenance for one of the bus depots, sometimes on the routes around where Emma disappeared, liked to hang around the driver's break area. Too friendly, if you ask me, always asking about passengers, women specifically, but we didn't have anything concrete, no complaint, no connection we could put in ink. When we got pulled onto other cases, his name just drifted. Do you remember the name? Harris does. He says it slowly, like he's pulling it up from under deep water. Ward writes it down, each letter suddenly heavy with possibility. Back at the station, the name goes into the system, and the system hums, thinks, and begins to spit out pieces of a life. That man, from the 80s, is in his late 50s now. Lived in different parts of London, mostly south of the river. Worked a series of maintenance and driving jobs. Never married, no children. A couple of minor arrests in the 90s for public disorder. Nothing violent on paper. Nothing that screams predator in the cold language of a record sheet. But his addresses trace a quiet route through the same neighborhoods Ward's red lines have been circling for days. One address jumps out. In 2017, at the time of Naomi's attempted break-in, he lived 2 streets away. Ward feels that invisible hand tighten around the room. Clark swivels in her chair, eyes wide. We need to see if his DNA's on file, she says. Old arrests, job medicals, anything that would have required a sample. If it's not, we need another way to get it. They search. Nothing. Somehow he slipped through all the nets, either before routine sampling was common or in roles that didn't require it. A ghost in the system. Present in addresses and payrolls and tax records, absent in the one database that now matters most. Do we bring him in? One of the younger detectives asks. Interview him? See what he does when we say her name? Not yet, Ward says sharply. We walk in there now with nothing but patterns and gut. He lawyers up and we lose any chance to catch him off guard. We need something more, something physical, something that ties him to one of these scenes, clean and undeniable. They work late. Phones ring. Old victims are contacted with cautious, rehearsed phrases. Ruth, older now and living on the coast, answers her phone with a voice that still carries the tremor of that night. She agrees to talk hesitantly, but with a strange, hard edge of curiosity. Time has not healed. It has calcified. Naomi, the more recent victim, listens as Ward explains, piece by piece, how the DNA on her door might be connected to something much older, much darker. She sits in a quiet interview room, days later, hands wrapped around a cup of tea she never drinks, and tries to remember everything about the sound of those footsteps running from her door. The shape of the shadow at the end of the hall. The smell in the air. It's not much. Trauma rarely is clean. But she does remember one thing clearly. There was a van outside, she says softly. When I looked out the window, a few minutes after, trying to see if anyone was still there. White panel van, no logo, parked under the street lamp. It pulled away about a minute later. I could see the driver's profile for a second. Short hair. I thought he looked familiar, like I'd seen him on the street before. But I couldn't place him. I told the officer back then, but they said there are a million vans like that in London. In the cold case unit, there is a quiet recalibration. Dark saloon, white van, 2 different vehicles, same type of approach. Someone who changes skins, changes shapes, blends. Men like this learn, Harris says over the phone when Ward relays that detail. They adapt, they hide in what's normal. Nobody looks twice at a bloke climbing out of a van or sitting in a parked car. They're everywhere. The map on the wall is a forest of pins now. Red for known offenses, yellow for attempted ones, blue for sightings that might mean nothing or everything. The man's past addresses sit like dark nodes among them. The line from 1985 to 1986 to 2017 is no longer a straight, simple thread. It's a web. And somewhere in the center of it is a girl with a cracked bag strap and a notebook full of plans, stepping off a bus and into a space nobody has yet properly mapped. The case is still officially cold, still labeled unsolved in the system. No one has changed the status, no one has typed the word closed. But in the cramped room where old ghosts are dragged onto new screens, something has definitely shifted. The dark shape at the edge of Emma Caldwell's disappearance is gaining features, a name, a history, a pattern of movement mapped against 35 years of London nights. They still don't know where she is. They still don't know exactly what happened in the gap between that bus pulling away and the moment the city realized she wasn't coming home. But now, for the first time in decades, the detectives in charge of her story can point at a very real man, living in a very real flat, breathing the same London air, and say, if anyone knows why she never made it back, it's him. And they know, with a cold, electric certainty, that sooner or later they're going to have to knock on his door. They don't go to his door first. That's the thing about cold cases finally heating up. You only get one real shot at surprise, and Ward isn't about to waste it. You don't walk up to a man who might have spent decades perfecting the art of staying invisible and give him time to disappear again. So they do what London does best. They watch. They start with the basics. The man, his name now printed on a briefing sheet, his face pulled from an old ID photo that's been sharpened and cleaned, works as a contractor. Maintenance, odd jobs, building repairs. No one single employer, just a rotating carousel of companies that use him when they need a pair of hands that doesn't ask too many questions. He has a small, neat flat in a tired block near the river. Pays on time, no noise complaints. Keeps himself to himself, neighbors say, with the particular shrug people use when they've never really looked at the man walking past them on the stairs. A plain car with plain officers sits on the street, engine off, condensation slowly fogging the inside of the windscreen. They watch him leave in the morning, a dark jacket, worn boots, a cheap thermos in his hand. He locks his door carefully, checks it twice, walks with the slow, unhurried pace of someone who has nowhere in particular to be, even when he's on his way to work. At night, he comes back with a small bag of groceries, carries them up the stairs, disappears. Nothing obvious, no flinches, no twitch when a police car rolls past. Just another middle-aged man in a city full of them. Ward watches from a distance through live feeds from a camera they've quietly set up inside a parked van. He studies the man's posture, his habits, the way he glances, or doesn't glance, at women passing him on the pavement. Cautious, controlled. There's nothing sloppy here, nothing reckless. If this is the driver from 1985, he's had a long time to become ordinary. At the same time, another team digs sideways through his past, peeling back layers. Old employers, old landlords, old neighbors. Some remember him, most don't. He was fine, I suppose. Quiet, kept odd hours sometimes, smoked a lot. Liked to sit in his car on breaks, they say, listening to the radio instead of joining the others inside. One former coworker, after a pause, adds something else. He knew the routes, he says. Bus routes, I mean, timetables, like a hobby. Used to talk about the night buses, the gaps between stops, which ones were quieter, which streets stayed dark after midnight. Thought he just liked public transport. London's full of weird obsessions, isn't it? Ward doesn't smile. The whiteboard in the cold case unit grows heavier with ink. The lines between 1985 and now darker, more insistent. Every interview, every scrap of recollection adds another layer. The same name shows up in connection with jobs near bus depots, train stations, late-night routes. He's always hovering at the edge of other people's journeys, the man in the background of a city constantly on the move. And yet they still don't have the one thing they need, his DNA. They could go the hard way, court orders, warrants. A knock on the door with a sterile swab and a carefully worded request. But Ward wants him unprepared, off balance. He wants the man to hand them his genetic fingerprint before he even realizes anyone is looking, so they wait, watch, track his patterns. There's a cafe he likes, small, greasy, the kind that's been there forever and never needed a proper website. He goes there twice a week, always at the same time, always orders tea and a bacon sandwich, sits at the same table, leaves his cup on the table when he's done, sometimes his fork, sometimes a napkin he's wiped his mouth with. He doesn't know that when he leaves one Tuesday afternoon, wearing the same dark jacket he's worn for years, a quiet man at the next table sighs, stands, and casually collects the dirty cup and plate with a practiced hand. The staff think he's with the council, some kind of inspector. He's not. He's with forensics. Back at the lab, under humming lights and stainless steel, gloved hands work carefully. Swabs, samples, a cup, a fork, a rim touched by lips, a handle gripped by fingers. It's all sealed, labeled, fed into machines that don't care about alibis or charm, about how kind you were to your neighbor's cat or how politely you held a door. They care about code. Ward doesn't sleep that night. He sits in his office long after the building empties, the glow from his monitor painting tired lines under his eyes. He rereads Emma's file, the updates, the new connections, the notes from Ruth and Naomi. He keeps flipping back to the same page, the bus route map from 1985, the stop, the narrow lane Clark highlighted. He can't stop tracing that tiny stretch of city with his finger, the short walk that swallowed a life whole. Out beyond the station, the man they're watching pours himself a drink in his silent flat, sits in his chair and looks at nothing in particular. Maybe he sleeps well. Maybe he lies awake staring at the ceiling. The city doesn't know. The walls don't talk. The next morning, the lab calls. The DNA from the cafe cup is a match. The same profile as the 1986 assault. The same profile as the partial trace from Naomi's door. A neat, undeniable triangle. 35 years compressed into a single identity. Ward closes his eyes for a second, lets the weight of it hit him. This is no longer a pattern of maybe, no longer lines on a whiteboard and gut feelings. A man who lived 2 streets from Naomi, who worked near bus routes in the 80s, whose name sat in the back of Harris's mind like a splinter, is genetically tied to 2 crimes, one violent, one almost. The odds of that being coincidence are 0. They still haven't proved he took Emma. They still haven't proved murder. But the cold case is no longer just cold, it's burning. The briefing before they move is terse, focused. A small team, no uniforms, no noise. This isn't a dramatic dawn raid for the cameras. This is precision. They need him inside, seated, surrounded by questions before he has time to decide who he wants to be today. Victim, witness, or the quiet monster who's been slipping through the cracks since 1985. They take him on a Thursday. It's almost boring the way it happens. He walks out of his building at the same time as always, keys in hand, thermos in his pocket. 2 plainclothes officers intercept him in the stairwell, badges shown, voices calm and firm. His first instinct is irritation. You can see it, the small crease between his eyebrows. Then his eyes catch the second officer, the way he stands, the way his hand lingers near the hidden restraint. Something in him recalibrates. "We'd like you to come with us to answer some questions," one of them says, voluntarily for now. He could refuse. He doesn't. That, Ward knows, is its own kind of answer. In the interview room, the air is stale, the walls that same neutral shade that's seen confessions, lies, breakdowns. The man sits in the plastic chair, hands on the table, eyes flicking to the camera in the corner, to the recorder's red light. He gives his name, his date of birth, his address, his current job. His voice is flat, unremarkable, the kind you'd forget as soon as you heard it over a broken tannoy. Ward sits across from him. Clark is at his side, a stack of files at her elbow. They've rehearsed this dance dozens of times, but this one feels different. In the back of Ward's mind, a faraway bus stop glows orange under a faulty street lamp. "We're reviewing a number of historical incidents in London," Ward begins, calm, almost conversational. "You lived and worked in the city during the 1980s, particularly around South London, near several bus routes. Is that right?" "Yes," the man says. His eyes are steady. He doesn't ask which routes. "You also still live in that general area today?" "Yes." They start broad. Work history, old employers, places he's lived. He answers smoothly, without hesitation, as if he's told this story before and made sure there are no loose threads. When they ask about the bus depots, the night shifts, he shrugs. Good hours for me, he says. Less traffic, easier work. They let the silence stretch, then Ward shifts. On the night of 12th October 1985, a young woman named Emma Caldwell disappeared after getting off a bus near Clapham Road. Do you remember hearing about that case? For the first time, there's a flicker, small, a tightening of his jaw. I remember lots of cases, he says. It's London. People go missing all the time. This one received considerable attention, Ward continues. 22-year-old student, lived on a route you were familiar with. It was in the papers for weeks. If you say so. He doesn't ask why they're bringing her up. He doesn't say, I didn't know her. He simply offers nothing. Clark opens a file. Photographs slide out onto the table. Not of Emma, not yet. A street map. 1985 layout, a photocopy of the stolen Ford report, the notes from the anonymous caller about the dark car, the unreliable witness. You owned a Ford Sierra, didn't you? Clark asks softly. Back then. No, he says immediately. Never did. You're sure? Yes, she taps the report. Because this says otherwise. Registered to your then employer as part of a fleet. You were the assigned driver. It was reported stolen 4 days before Emma disappeared. Never recovered. His eyes drop to the paper. For a moment, his mask thins. Then it's back. That was years ago, he mutters. I forgot. It was the company's, not mine. Funny thing to forget, Ward says. A whole car. They let that hang between them. Next, Clark slides a different photo onto the table. Ruth's. Younger. Smiling awkwardly, her 1986 features frozen under harsh flash. Beside it, a grainy black and white of the narrow street where she was attacked. Do you recognize this woman? No. This street? Doesn't ring a bell. Your DNA was found on evidence recovered from that assault, Ward says quietly. You were never interviewed at the time, but science has caught up. There it is. Shock, fast and bright, chased quickly by something colder. His eyes harden, then smooth. That's impossible, he says. It's not, Ward replies. We have your DNA from multiple sources, including a cup you used at a cafe last week. It matches the profile from the 1986 case and the partial profile from an attempted break-in in 2017. 3 points. Same man. He leans back, folds his arms. I don't know anything about that. If someone used my cup, that's not my problem. Maybe your lab made a mistake. It's textbook. Deny the science. Blame the process. Create doubt. What about this? Clark asks. She places a photo of Naomi's door on the table, then another of the view from her window. The angle shows the street, the exact spot where a white panel van could sit under the street lamp. You lived 2 streets away when someone tried to get into this flat. You work in a job where you regularly have access to buildings, keys, door codes. He shrugs again, but there's a tension in his shoulders now, like a wire being pulled taut. I've worked in a lot of buildings, he says. Doesn't mean I break into them. Help me out here, Ward says, voice dropping, the question shifting from procedural to personal. Because from where I'm sitting, the picture looks ugly. A young woman dragged into a car in 1986, assaulted. Another woman nearly attacked at her own front door in 2017. And in the middle of it all, a missing student in 1985 who stepped off a bus into the dark and was never seen again. You're at the edges of all three. You're in the right places at the right times with the right habits, and your DNA is tied to 2 of those scenes. So tell me why we shouldn't believe you drove that dark car in 1985. For the first time, he looks directly at Emma's name on the file. It's written on a tab, a simple strip of white with black letters. He stares at it like it's something stuck to his shoe. I want a solicitor, he says. There it is, the line, the wall, the invocation of rights that slams brakes on momentum. Ward nods curtly. The interview pauses. Procedures kick in. Outside the room, in the corridor that smells of cleaning fluid and tired air, Clark lets out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. We rattled him, she says. We needed more than rattling, Ward replies, but his eyes are burning. They have what they needed most. Confirmation that this man is tied firmly to violent acts around the same time and place that swallowed Emma. They have his lies, recorded, lining up badly against documented history. They have his DNA. What they still don't have is Emma. News of the arrest doesn't go public. Not yet. But word always finds ways of slipping through keyholes. By that evening, Emma's mother is on the phone with a liaison officer, hands shaking as she listens to careful, measured language. A person of interest. Connected incidents. New forensic links. The words loop and tangle in her head, but one thing cuts through. After 35 years, someone is in a room being asked about her daughter. When she hangs up, she walks into Emma's room. The posters, the books, the small cactus, long since replaced by another and another, each one dying eventually, but the pot staying the same. She sits on the edge of the bed and whispers into the empty space. "They're asking about you," she says. "They're still asking." Back in the station, the cold case unit takes its next step. If this man is their driver, if he used cars and vans like skins he could shed, then somewhere along those old routes there might be more than just memories. A body, a burial site, a place he thought no one would ever look because for decades no one did. They pull old maps again, but this time it isn't just bus routes. It's wasteland. Construction sites, disused lots that existed in 1985 and don't anymore. Patches of ground that were once empty, then swallowed by retail parks, car parks, new estates. They mark every patch within a radius of Emma's last known position that a car could have reached in 10-15 minutes, late at night without drawing attention. They overlay it with historical planning records. There are places that were dug up in the 90s, the 2000s, foundations poured, pipes laid. Places where, if someone had hidden something there, it might have been disturbed, noticed, nothing was. But there are still gaps. A strip of old railway land turned informal dumping ground, behind a warehouse that changed owners 3 times. A corner of park that was overgrown for years before anyone bothered to tame it. A sliver of ground behind an old bus depot wall, shielded from view back then by a line of rusting metal and overgrown shrubs. When Clark circles that last spot on the map, the room goes quiet. "Back gate here," she says. In the 80s, this would have been a dead zone. No houses looking directly at it. Minimal lighting, easy access if you knew the depot layout, easy to park a car out of sight for a while. Who worked maintenance at that depot in 1985, Ward asks, though he already knows the answer. She doesn't need to say the name. The next morning, under a washed-out sky, they stand behind that bus depot wall, in a patch of ground that smells of damp earth and old oil. The depot has changed since 1985. New fences, new gates, new CCTV. But the bones of the place are the same. Behind the wall, the earth dips slightly, an old indentation where something heavy once sat, long ago, and then was forgotten. Specialist teams arrive. Cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar. The kind of equipment they never had when Emma first vanished. Officers cordon off the area. The depot manager watches from a distance, pale, as fluorescent jackets move through the long grass. The dogs sniff, circle, pause. One of them sits down suddenly in that slight dip in the earth and doesn't move. The handler's hand tightens on the lead. He raises his head and meets Ward's eyes. There's no celebration in that look, no triumph, just the hollow, heavy recognition that they may have finally found the one thing Emma's file has never had, a place where the story stopped. For 35 years, London has walked over this ground without knowing. Buses have come and gone. Drivers have clocked in and out. Engines have roared to life inches from soil that might be holding a secret too old, too deep, too cruel. Now the machines move in. The cold case is no longer just paper, no longer just maps and theories. It is shovels and spades and careful gloved hands pulling back layers of dirt, inch by inch, under a sky that seems to hold its breath. They don't know yet what they'll find. But as the first cut of earth is made, one thing is brutally clear. Whatever lies beneath this patch of forgotten London will either finally give Emma back to the city that lost her, or reveal that the darkness they're chasing has roots far deeper than anyone ever imagined. At first it's just dirt, dark, wet, clinging to gloves and boots and the edges of shovels. The kind of London soil that has swallowed 100 years of cigarette ends, broken glass, rusted bolts, and forgotten things. The team moves slowly, carefully, stripping the ground layer by layer, eyes trained for any break in the pattern of brown and black and gray. The hum of the bus depot on the other side of the wall is a low, constant backdrop. Engines, shouted instructions, the hiss of air brakes, like the city refusing to acknowledge what's happening on its blind side. Ward stands just beyond the tape, boots planted in the flattened grass, his coat zipped up against a wind that feels colder than it should. Clark is beside him, arms folded, eyes fixed on the shallow pit forming in the earth. Harris is there too, leaning on a walking stick he pretends is just for comfort, not necessity. Retired or not, he insisted on being present. He was there at the start, he said. He'd be there if this was finally the end. The dogs have moved back, their noses still twitching, handlers watching for any shift, any signal. The radar unit sits off to the side, its display showing subtle distortions in the soil layers that brought them here, faint shapes buried beneath decades of rain and neglect. It's all abstract until the first shout cuts across the site. "Stop there! Stop!" The word freezes everyone. A forensic officer kneels at the edge of the pit. his gloved hand hovering over something that isn't stone, isn't root, isn't industrial scrap. It's a curve, pale and smooth under the smear of mud. Fragile. Wrong. They work by hand now, brushes instead of shovels. Small trowels, the kind you'd see in a careful gardener's shed, not a crime scene. Grain by grain, the earth falls away, and a shape emerges. The curve becomes a skull. The hollow eye socket turns upward, blind and patient. For a moment, nobody speaks. It isn't the first body any of them have seen. It won't be the last. But this one is different. This one has been calling them for 35 years. More bones appear, ribs, vertebrae. The suggestion of arms curled inward, legs drawn slightly to the side like someone folding into themselves against the cold. There are scraps of fabric, rotted, color long gone, threads disintegrating at a touch. Something metal glints faintly in the muck near what used to be a hand. A small key ring, warped, with a key so rusted it looks more like a twig. Next to it, a thin chain, knotted and broken, clinging in places to bone. Clark's throat tightens. She knows from the old file, the list written in Emma's mother's careful handwriting of items she usually carries. A notebook, a cheap leather bag, a thin silver necklace with a small, flat pendant shaped like a crescent moon. It had been a birthday gift, the kind of detail that stuck in the file like a thorn. Bag this separately, the lead forensic officer says, voice clipped. Photograph everything in situ, no assumptions. But everyone is already making one. Harris stares at the skull like it's accusing him personally. His hand tightens on the stick. She was here, he mutters, more to himself than anyone. All this time, she was right here. Ward doesn't answer. There's nothing to say that doesn't collapse under the weight of it. A few meters of concrete, a wall, 3 decades. That's all that separated the original search from this patch of ground. The depot in 1985 had been just over there. The officers had stood on the other side, smoking, talking, going through their checklists, unaware that a young woman lay buried where the overflow light didn't quite reach. By late afternoon, the remains are fully exposed. Every bone, every fragment, catalogued and photographed before being lifted, piece by piece, into labeled bags. The pendant comes up last. The crescent shape is bent, tarnished but unmistakable. It hangs from the tweezers like a tiny, dead moon. Clark's breath catches. That's her necklace? She says quietly. It has to be. Has to be doesn't go in the report, the forensic lead replies, but his eyes soften for a moment. We'll see what the family says, and what the records say. The remains go to the mortuary. The key goes into evidence, the necklace into a separate tray, sterile, isolated, waiting to be matched against photographs from another lifetime. The soil is sampled for trace elements, for pollen, for anything that can whisper how long this body has lain here and what the ground did to it. The room at the mortuary is quiet, humming with refrigeration and soft footsteps. The pathologist moves with the slow certainty of someone who has walked this line between the living and the dead for years. Bones tell stories if you know how to listen. Age, sex, old injuries, trauma. They compare dental records, teeth against notes made in 1984 at a routine checkup Emma had barely remembered at the time. They match. Bite for bite, it's her. The official confirmation comes in clinical language, a document, a signature, a tick in a database that has been showing her as missing for 35 years. Now, with a keystroke, Emma Caldwell becomes deceased, remains recovered. Lines shift on screens. Statuses update. In one section, the words undetermined fate vanish. In another, quietly, without ceremony, the case classification flips from missing persons to homicide. Ward is the one who goes to see Emma's mother. He won't delegate this. There are duties that belong to rank, and then there are duties that belong to the human being inside the rank. The house is smaller than he pictured. The garden overgrown but neat around the edges, as if someone trims just enough to keep chaos from winning completely. Emma's mother opens the door slowly, her face thinner than the photos in the file, eyes ringed with the kind of tired that doesn't sleep off. When she sees the badge, the notebook, the small, solemn distance in Ward's posture, her hand flies to her mouth. "Have you found her?" she asks. No preamble, no greeting. Just the question that has been waiting behind every phone call, every news report, every knock. Ward doesn't make her sit before he answers. To drag out hope would be another cruelty. "Yes," he says. "We believe we have." He tells her as gently as possible, but there is no gentle way to say remains to a mother. He explains about the depot, the ground, the identification. He doesn't use the word skeleton. He doesn't need to. It's in the air between them anyway. For a moment, she doesn't cry. She closes her eyes, exhales a sound that's somewhere between a sob and a laugh. So she's not just gone, she whispers. She was somewhere, all this time. She was somewhere. That's the thing nobody tells you. Sometimes certainty hurts less than the endless maybes. Do you know what happened to her? She asks, voice raw. We're still working on that, Ward says. We've arrested a man in connection with other serious offenses in the same area. We are actively investigating his links to Emma. The word arrested lands like a stone in still water. She nods slowly, every muscle in her face fighting to stay controlled. There will be tests, he says, an in-depth examination. We'll know more when that's finished. There may be a formal identification process, but we will support you through every step. I don't need to see bones, she says quietly. I already know it's her. I've always known she didn't just walk away. He nods. Sometimes mothers know before anyone else. Back in London, the story leaks. It was never going to stay quiet. A tip to a journalist here, a whisper from someone who saw the excavation there, a paramedic telling a friend in a late-night cafe. By the time the Metropolitan Police Press Office drafts a statement, social media is already lighting up. Human remains discovered near South London bus depot linked to 1985 missing student case. London, 1985 cold case solved. Police find body in forgotten lot. The word solved jumps fast, faster than the facts. It's an easy hook, a clean line, the kind that fits neatly on a ticker at the bottom of a rolling news channel. At the press conference, under harsh lights and a low ceiling, Ward stands at a podium and tries to wrestle the story back under control. Behind him is a board with Emma's photo, newly printed but still the same old image, her eyes impossibly young for the year printed beneath. We can confirm, he says, voice even, that remains found in South London have been formally identified as those of Emma Caldwell, who disappeared in October 1985. Our thoughts are with her family at this difficult time. This development represents a significant step in a long-running investigation, but I must emphasize, while we have confirmed her fate, our work continues to fully establish the circumstances of her death and to hold those responsible to account. Reporters throw questions like stones. Is this now being treated as murder? Yes, he answers. Given the circumstances of her disappearance and where she was found, we are treating this as a homicide. Is the man you've arrested being charged with her murder? An individual is currently under arrest in relation to separate serious offenses. We are actively investigating his potential involvement in Emma's disappearance and death. I cannot comment further on that at this time. Does this mean the London 1985 cold case is solved? Ward pauses on that one, just for a fraction of a second. Cameras zoom in. Somewhere, a producer nudges a sound technician. It means, he says carefully, that after 35 years, Emma has been found. That is not the same as saying every question has been answered. It's not the quote they wanted, but it's the only one he can live with. In living rooms and break rooms and crowded pubs, people watch the clip play again and again. Some remember the original case, the posters, the old headlines. Others are hearing her name for the first time. Emma Caldwell, they say, testing it on their tongues like the name of a stranger they feel they should have known. In the flat where the arrested man used to sit and watch TV with the sound off, officers now move through the rooms like a quiet, methodical storm. Every drawer, every box, every corner of dust and forgotten clutter is fair game. They lift floorboards. They peel back carpet edges. They take photographs of old functions and faces if there are any. Though here, there are almost none. It's a life stripped of history. Still, every now and then, something slips. A receipt for petrol near the depot, decades old, tucked into the back of a drawer. A faded bus timetable from 1985 folded into a book. A lost photograph from a depot Christmas party where he stands at the edge of the group, half turned away, background to his own life. None of it screams murderer in a way that would satisfy a jury on its own. But together they form a murmur, a suggestion, a shape in the dark that looks more and more like the shadow that sat behind a wheel one wet October night. In the interview room, after his solicitor arrives, the man says very little. He denies the assault in 1986, despite the DNA. He claims mishandling, contamination, conspiracy, anything but the simplest truth. As for Emma, he insists he never met her, never saw her, never drove that particular stretch of road on that particular night. You worked next to the depot, Ward says. You knew the gates, the blind spots. You had access to vehicles, to the back entrance. You knew which nights were quiet, which shifts had fewer eyes. He sits, expression flat. You can say what you like, he replies. That doesn't make it true. But the ground has already spoken. The depot has turned on him. The bus routes he once studied like a hunter's map now trace back to a grave with his name hovering just out of frame. Outside, the city digests the news in its own messy way. Some feel a flicker of relief. The girl on the poster is no longer in limbo. She has a place, a date, a burial, Others feel a fresh wave of unease. If this could happen there, could happen then, who else slipped under the surface and stayed there? What other cold cases are waiting under patches of grass that look like nothing at all? At the bookshop where Emma once worked, the owner, now old and bent but stubbornly still behind the counter, prints out the latest article and pins it to the staff notice board. He doesn't say much to the young workers who read it and frown. He just stares at the black and white image of her face, now tucked between staff rotas and delivery schedules, and whispers under his breath, "We never forgot you, love." In Emma's old room, her mother folds the police liaison's latest letter, smoothing the creases like fabric. There will be an inquest. There will be a formal process. There will, in time, be a funeral. Real. Official. With a coffin and a grave and flowers that die in the air, not in the silent dirt behind a depot wall. She sits on the bed, picks up the cactus pot, now holding yet another stubborn little plant. "They say your case is moving again," she says into the quiet. "They say someone might finally pay for what happened. But you and I know, don't we? Even when they write solved on paper, it's never really finished. Because solving a case doesn't rewind a bus. It doesn't dry the rain on a 1985 pavement. It doesn't unteach a predator the routes he once drove, the shadows he once used like tools. It doesn't erase the years she spent under concrete and soil, nameless in official records even as her name was whispered in kitchens and corridors. In the cold case unit, the label on Emma's file is updated. Recovered. Homicide. Primary suspect identified. Someone staples the new tag over the old one. The box feels heavier in Ward's hands than it did when all it held was air and questions. Now it contains something else. Answers of a sort, and the weight of knowing that solved is just another word for we finally found where the story stopped. But the story isn't done. Not yet. Not while a man in custody is still pretending not to see her name. Not while other pins on the map glow faintly, other women's faces staring out of old reports, other unanswered questions circling the same dark streets. And somewhere in those streets, under the new LED lights and in the reflections of bus windows, the past and present still walk side by side. A city that finally knows where one of its lost daughters lay, but is only just beginning to understand how many nights it let a driver move through its veins without ever asking who he was really taking home. The pathologist's report lands on Ward's desk with a dull thump that feels louder than it should. It's just paper, just ink, but everyone in the cold case unit knows this is where the dead finally get to speak in a language the living can prosecute. He flips it open, eyes scanning the dense blocks of text, the diagrams, the careful clinical phrasing that sits like ice over something brutal. Female. Approximate age consistent with Emma Caldwell at time of disappearance. No signs of old fractures. No evidence of prolonged illness. Perimortem trauma to the hyoid bone. Damage to cartilaginous structures in the neck consistent with sustained compression. It's a long way of saying what everyone already suspected. She was strangled, Ward says quietly. Clark stands at his shoulder reading over him. She swallows hard. Manual. The pathologist has anticipated the question. Ligature-type injuries cannot be ruled out. Pattern is more suggestive of sustained pressure from hands or forearm than of narrow ligature. Additional trace fibers recovered from remaining fabric remnants may assist in determining mechanism. Hands, then. Someone's hands around her throat, in the dark behind that depot wall, pressing down until everything stopped. No gunshot echoes, no knife flashes, just silence, prolonged and deliberate. There are other details. Soil in the upper airways, suggesting she was close to the ground when she died. Micro-abrasions on the remaining bones of her wrists that could indicate restraint. No obvious signs of sexual assault that survived decomposition, but the position of the body, the location, the established pattern from Ruth's case, all point in one direction. It's enough, Clark says, more to convince herself than him. It's homicide, method consistent with a hands-on killer, dump site tied to his workplace. DNA place him in the pattern. The old assault, Naomi, the depot, the routes, it's all there. Ward doesn't answer immediately. He's thinking of juries, of defense barristers with sharp tongues and sharper suits, of words like circumstantial and historic and degradation of evidence. Almost there, he says finally. We're almost there, but almost isn't enough. The fibers mentioned in the report are their next hope. A sliver of fabric fused to a scrap of decomposed clothing, threads that don't match the faded remnants of Emma's own garments. They go under a microscope, then into a comparative database. Pattern, weave, dye. Somewhere in the labyrinth of textile records, a match might be waiting. A particular type of seat cover used in certain vehicles, a uniform, a work jacket issued by a specific company. While forensics work their slow, meticulous magic, the rest of the machine grinds on. The the man they've arrested, the one who once sat on the edge of depot Christmas photos and watched buses roll in and out like prey animals at a watering hole, has been formally charged in connection with the 1986 assault and the 2017 attempted break-in. Those are the cases the DNA locks down beyond argument. He pleads not guilty. At the preliminary hearing, he stands in the dock, expression neutral, eyes scanning the courtroom as if he's there to fix the plumbing, not to answer for violence that stretches back to when cassette tapes were still stacked in Emma's room. The charges are read, the dates, the names, Ruth, Naomi, their words, their fear, distilled into formal accusations. He looks at none of them. When asked for his plea, he responds with a flat, almost bored, not guilty. Outside, cameras swing, reporters pivot to face the courthouse doors, microphones held up like spears. Suspected serial predator denies charges, the chyrons say. London 1985 cold case suspect back in court. That word again, suspect. The law clings to it until it can't. Tying him directly to Emma is harder. There is no DNA from him on her remains. Not that survived 35 years of soil and rain and slow chemical decay. The ground has eaten his trace. What they have instead are converging lines. His access to the depot, his stolen Sierra, his documented presence on the night routes, his pattern of targeting women walking alone near bus stops. The pathologist's timing estimate on the burial places her in the ground within hours of her last sighting. He was on shift that night. He had a vehicle. He knew that blind patch of land. But knowing and proving are different things. Ward knows they need more than maps and gut and horror. They need voices, people who can stand in the witness box and say, he was there, he scared me, he tried something, he asked the wrong questions at the wrong time. They go back out. Old victim lists, old complaints that never made it to full reports because someone decided no crime established in the margins. Women who walked home in the 80s and 90s with the feeling of being watched, followed, circled. Some still live in the city. Some moved as far away as they could afford. Some don't answer the phone. Others do, with a caution that eases into fury when they hear Emma's name. One woman, now in her 50s, sits in a quiet interview room, fingers worrying the edge of a paper cup. "It was late," she says. "Night bus dropped me off near the depot. I was stupid, I know, walking alone, but that's what you did back then. There was this car, just crawling behind me. Not enough to say it was following, but enough to feel it. Dark. 4-door. He pulled up next to me eventually, window down, asked if I wanted a ride, said it wasn't safe, me walking alone. He smiled like he was doing me a favor. She pauses, swallows. I said no. He watched me for a bit, then he drove off, slow. I still remember the way the engine sounded. She'd reported it back then, half-heartedly, more as a by the way, when an officer came to speak to her about a burglary on her street. The officer had written a line about it in his notebook, somewhere below other priorities. Then that notebook had vanished into a drawer, then into a box, then into the churning archive that didn't meet a search engine until Clark pulled it up weeks ago. "What about his face?" Ward asks gently. "Average," she says, frustrated. "That's the worst part. Every time I try to picture him, he just looks like any bloke. Dark hair, normal. That's what scared me, I think. He looked like everyone else." They show her a photo of the suspect recent. Then one from the 80s, dug up from an old employee record. She stares at the younger version for a long time. "I can't say for sure," she finally whispers. "I won't lie, but if I had to pick someone, it'd be him." It's not a positive ID, not in a way that will survive cross-examination, but it's the same shape as everything else, the same outline. Ruth agrees to come to London. She arrives on a gray morning, the city looking nothing like the one that spat her out in 1986. She walks into the station with shoulders squared, eyes hard. Time has put deep lines in her face, but it hasn't erased the edge in her voice. She sits in front of a camera again, retells the worst night of her life in slow, steady sentences that shake slightly around the edges. "I thought he was going to kill me," she says. "In that car, in that back seat. I remember thinking, this is it. This is where it ends. This stupid, narrow street where nobody can see me. When I heard he might be connected to that missing girl, I knew he didn't stop with me." They show her the 80s photo, too. She stares at it, tears blurring the edges, anger holding them back from falling. "It's like he's been haunting the corner of my eye for 30 years, she says. "I can't swear to it in court. I know how this works. But my gut says that's him." The CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, weighs everything. The forensic report, the depot, the patterns, the interviews. The suspect's own lies about the vehicle, about his work history, about never hearing about Emma, when his colleagues recall him talking about the case like it was just another story to pass time on break. It comes down to a question: is it enough? Enough to stand up under the defense's assault, enough to convince 12 strangers that a man who has spent his life blending into the background is the same man who dragged a student into a car, strangled her, and buried her behind a wall like rubbish. Behind closed doors, in meetings filled with files and tension, lawyers and detectives go back and forth. There are risks, high ones. Historic cases are fragile by nature. One procedural misstep in 1985, one missing form, one lost chain of custody entry, and a defense team can start pulling at threads until the whole thing looks frayed. But there's also the other side, the public pressure, the headlines screaming, "London 1985 cold case solved," with a rising question mark that everyone wants to turn into a full stop. The family who has waited half a lifetime for someone to say, "This is what happened, and this is who did it." In the end, the decision lands in a simple sentence. "We will charge him with the murder of Emma Caldwell." Ward reads the email twice, as if the words might rearrange themselves. They don't. He feels both lighter and heavier at the same time. The case will go forward. Emma's name will be read out in court, not as a missing person, but as a victim whose story now has lines attached to a very real, very present man. When they serve the additional charge, the suspect listens without visible reaction. Murder. October 1985. Name: Emma Caldwell. He sits still, hands folded. When asked if he understands, he nods once. "Do you wish to say anything in response to this charge?" the officer asks, recorder ticking softly on the table. He looks up, eyes like worn stones. "You're all making a mistake," he says. "You're trying to pin everything on me because you're embarrassed you didn't catch whoever did it back then." He doesn't shout. He doesn't rage. He presents himself as the rational one in a room full of overreaching fools. It's a strategy. It's always been his strategy. Blend, sound normal, let the horror look like it belongs to someone else. Still, the charge stands. When the news breaks, the phrase, "London 1985 cold case solved," finally appears without a question mark on some outlets. Others hedge it with alleged and charged. But the message is clear. Somebody is going to stand trial for what happened to Emma. Survival stories of Ruth and Naomi are folded into the narrative, their names attached to bold pull quotes about fear and anger and finally being believed. The man in the dock gets his own headlines too, his face splashed across screens under words like predator, suspected serial offender, silent driver in the dark. In the cold case unit, the mood is strange. There's no celebration, no high fives, just a quiet, exhausted exhale and the knowledge that the hardest part hasn't even started. Trial prep is its own kind of battle. Every detail, every word, every map and photo and lab result must be lined up, checked, tested, sharpened. Harris comes in more often now, sitting in the corner of the briefing room, listening as younger officers present time-lapse reconstructions of routes, as digital analysts show 3D models of the depot and burial site, as lawyers run through likely lines of attack from the defense. "You'll be on the stand," one of the prosecutors tells him. "They'll ask why you didn't find her back then, why you didn't push harder on the car, why his name stayed in your notebook and not in an arrest report." He nods slowly. "I know," he says, "and I'll tell them the truth. We missed things. We didn't have the tech, but we also didn't have the imagination. We thought we were dealing with a one-off disappearance, not someone who keeps circling the same streets for years. We thought the city was big enough to hide this kind of man in its cracks forever. We were wrong." "Jurors like honesty," the prosecutor says. "They don't like cover-ups." There's another witness Ward thinks about calling, even though officially she's not part of the case, Emma's mother. She can't testify about the crime itself, but she can put flesh back on the bones, turn the girl from a forensic diagram into a person. The defense might object. Emotional manipulation, they'll say. But juries need more than facts. They need to understand who was taken. In the end, they decide to keep her statement for the victim impact phase, if there is a conviction. For now, the story in court will be told by maps, experts, survivors, and the detectives who refused to let a faded file stay quiet. On the night before the first big pretrial hearing, Ward walks the route Emma took. He doesn't tell anyone he's doing it. He leaves the station when the sky is already darkening, takes the same bus line she did, watches the city flicker past in reflections on the glass. People stare at their phones, at nothing, at each other. No one notices him. He gets off at the stop near where she vanished. The street lamp flickers, new bulb in an old fitting. The road is different now. New paint, new speed humps, different shop fronts. But the bones are the same. He walks from the stop to where her flat used to be. He times it, letting his steps match the rhythm she might have had that night. bag on shoulder, notebook in hand, thoughts somewhere between a half-written article and getting home before the kettle boils dry. At the point where the CCTV coverage used to end and the dark used to thicken, he stops. There's a camera here now, bolted high to a pole, red light blinking. Too late, he thinks. But not useless. Not if this trial does what it's supposed to. He replays it in his head, a car pulling up, a voice offering a lift, a hand on an arm, a smile that didn't reach the eyes, the pull of a door, the snap of a lock. Then the engine, the turn, the short drive to the depot's blind side, hands around a throat, feet kicking against empty air and oil-stained dirt. He's seen horror. He's investigated dozens of murders. But this one has sunk hooks into him in a way he can't fully shake. Maybe it's the time span. The idea that while he was learning multiplication tables, while he was riding his own bus routes as a kid, Emma was already in the ground behind that wall. Maybe it's the way the city carried on, oblivious, building on top of her silence. He walks back to the depot, stands outside the wall where they dug her up. The soil is different now, leveled, covered, marked by a small temporary sign. Police investigation area, no unauthorized access. Inside the depot, buses still come and go, their headlights sweeping across the bricks like searchlights that arrive 35 years late. Tomorrow, the court system will start its slow, ritualized attempt to make sense of what happened here. Arguments will be made, exhibits shown, experts challenged. On paper, in headlines and broadcasts, the phrase London 1985 cold case solved will be repeated until it sounds like a final chapter. But standing here with the low roar of engines and the distant hum of the city in his ears, Ward knows better. The law can draw a line under a case. It can say solved, convicted, closed. But for the people who walked through those years of not knowing, for the woman who sat in Emma's room and talked to a bed that never warmed, for the survivors who heard news of the arrest and felt old fear crash over them like it was yesterday, endings are never that clean. Still, he thinks, staring at the wall, it's a start. The driver thought this place would swallow what he did, that the city would keep moving, laying new routes, new concrete, new stories over the top of what he buried. For decades, he was right. Now, finally, the route is running in reverse. The buses still roll forward, but the investigation is dragging everything back. To a dark night in October 1985, to a missing girl with a crescent moon necklace, to a pair of hands around a throat behind a depot wall. And somewhere in a holding cell not far from here, the man who has spent most of his life convinced he could drive through London's veins without ever leaving a trace is beginning to realize that the tracks he thought he'd wiped clean have been waiting all this time for someone to follow them home. They call it the Emma Caldwell trial before it even starts. That's how it appears on news tickers, in inboxes, on hashtags. Not the defendant's name, not the official case number, but hers. As if, at last, the story belongs to her more than to the man sitting in the dock. But when the first day arrives, it still feels like he's the gravitational center of the room. The courtroom is old wood and new cameras, microphones wired discreetly, press benches packed. Members of the public queue outside before dawn, some because they remember the original case, others because they have never met a headline they didn't want to stand up close to. Barristers in wigs shuffle papers, clerks whisper, the judge takes his seat, robes heavy, expression grave, and then they bring him in. The defendant is smaller than the monster in everyone's head. No horns, no visible darkness. Just a man in a plain shirt and jacket, hair thinner than in the old photos, face softer with age and bad lighting. He takes his place in the dock, glances briefly around, and then fixes his gaze somewhere around the judge's chest, as if none of this quite applies to him. There's a moment, barely a heartbeat, when the room seems to tilt. Then the clerk reads out the charge. Murder of Emma Caldwell on or about the 12th day of October, 1985. The words hang in the air like smoke. They don't sound like something that should still be needing an answer after 35 years. How do you plead? Not guilty. 2 words. Flat. Practiced. The kind of words you could say about parking tickets, not about a girl who stepped off a bus and ended up as bones under depot soil. But that's the point. To him, this is just procedure. To everyone else, it's an earthquake. The jury is sworn in. 12 strangers from a city that once lost Emma and is now being asked to sit in judgment over the man accused of making that happen. You can see the flicker in their eyes as they glance toward her photo, printed large on a board the prosecution has placed, where it can't be ignored. They've all seen it before, on news reports, on their phones. But seeing it here, under the hard lines of courtroom light, is different. Here, that young woman with the half-smile isn't an icon, she's evidence. The prosecution opens, voice measured, words sharpened. They don't promise miracles. They don't pretend this case is clean or simple. Instead, they lean into the complexity, the time, the gaps. You are going to hear about a night in London in 1985, the lead prosecutor says, and about how for decades that night seemed to vanish into fog and rain and missing paperwork. But you will also hear how advances in science and a renewed investigation have dragged that night back into focus. This case is about patterns, about opportunities, about a man who used the city's dark spaces as cover, and it is about Emma Caldwell, who never made it home. They lay out the skeleton of the story first. Not the one pulled from the earth, but the narrative frame. Emma leaving the pub, the bus ride, the stop, the blind corner by the depot, the defendant's job, his access, his stolen Ford, his habits, the 1986 assault, the 2017 break-in attempt, the DNA, the grave behind the wall. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the prosecutor says, you will not see a grainy CCTV image of the defendant grabbing Emma. There is no confession, no single piece of video that ties him to her in the way you might expect from a modern case. But what you will see and hear is a chain. Each link on its own may seem ordinary. Together, they form a path that leads step by step from this man to that grave. The defense, when it's their turn, doesn't roar. They slide. Their barrister is smooth, polished, every word carefully chosen to plant seeds of doubt in soil that's already cracked with time. This is, above all, a case about the passage of years, he says. You will be asked to make life-changing judgments based on memories from a different era, on notes written by tired officers using methods that would be unthinkable today, on assumptions made in the rush and panic of an investigation from a time when, by the prosecution's own admission, things were missed. My client maintains his innocence. He is not responsible for the terrible tragedy that befell Miss Caldwell. The police, embarrassed by their failure to solve this case at the time, are now attempting to close their file by forcing the pieces of other, unrelated incidents into this puzzle. We will show you that the connections they speak of are tenuous, incomplete, and in some cases plainly coincidental. He doesn't look at Emma's mother when he says tragedy, but she feels it like a slap anyway. And then the evidence parade begins. Maps first, projected onto screens pinned to boards. The 1985 street layout, the bus route, the missing CCTV coverage, the depot, the burial site. A digital reconstruction of that October night, rain layered over a simulated street lamp flicker, a ghost bus pulling away from the stop. The jurors watch, some leaning forward, some staring hard at their hands, then forensics. The pathologist steps into the witness box, swears the oath, and begins the slow, clinical unpacking of what Emma's bones have to say. Age, sex, cause of death, strangulation, the estimated time she was placed in the ground, the position of the body, the absence of post-mortem disturbance. Could she have died of natural causes? The prosecutor asks, though everyone knows the answer. No. Could this have been a consensual encounter gone wrong, after which someone panicked? The pathologist's face doesn't change. The context, the clandestine burial in a concealed area behind a workplace wall, the absence of any attempt to summon help, the effort made to ensure the body was not found, strongly supports homicidal intent. The defense tries to nibble at the edges. Doctor, can you say with complete certainty that the injuries to the neck were caused by human hands and not, say, by some mechanical pressure during burial or subsequent ground movement? I can say, the pathologist replies, cool as ice, that the pattern of damage is highly consistent with manual strangulation, while nothing in forensic pathology is ever absolute in a mathematical sense. This is as close as one gets. A juror writes something down, hand moving fast. Then comes the DNA expert, walking the jury through profiles and alleles and match probabilities. The 1986 assault kit, the 2017 door handle, the cafe cup, the defendant's profile, tying all three together with a statistical weight that makes coincidence look ridiculous. So you are telling this court, the prosecutor says, voice calm, that the chances of this DNA profile belonging to someone other than the defendant, while also matching the DNA recovered from the 1986 crime and the 2017 incident, are... The expert recites the figure. It's big, the kind of number that melts into infinity in the average mind. You can see it land on the jury like a physical pressure. The defense pushes back where they can. Contamination, they suggest. Sample handling errors. Multiple people using the same surfaces. They bring up historic lab scandals from other cases, unrelated but close enough to cast a shadow. They don't need to dismantle the expert. They just need to make him look human, fallible. But science, for once, feels like the most solid ground in the room. It's the human parts that wobble. When Ruth takes the stand, the atmosphere shifts. The jurors see her as she is now, not as the 23-year-old woman whose clothes were bagged and tagged under neon hospital light. But when she speaks, the years strip away. She tells them about the street, the car, the hand on her arm, the smell of smoke, the ashtray, the panic, the feeling of the seat's rough fabric under her fingers, the way she scraped and scratched and thought, this is it. Did you see your attacker's face clearly? The prosecutor asked gently. No, she says. It was dark. He was behind me, then over me. I saw pieces, jaw, hair, but not enough. Do you believe you would recognize him now? She looks at the doc for the first time. He stares back, expression carefully blank. For a second, the room feels like it might implode. I believe, she says slowly, that he looks like the man who attacked me, but I know memory isn't perfect. That's why I'm not here to say, I am 100% sure. I'm here to tell you what happened, and to tell you that the DNA you've heard about was taken from me, from my body, after that night. Whoever that belongs to, that's who did it. The defense tries to shake her. Why didn't she identify him sooner? Why didn't she push harder when the case went nowhere? Why did she move away? She absorbs each question like a wave, lets it break, then continues. I did everything they told me to do at the time, she says. I reported, I cooperated, I waited. They didn't test the kit then. That wasn't me, that was them. You can't put that on my shoulders now. A juror's jaw tightens. Someone in the public gallery wipes their eyes. Naomi follows. Her story is quieter because the attack never fully landed, but the fear is the same species. The key turning in the lock, the handle moving, the decision to slam her hand against the door and shout, the retreating footsteps, the white van under the lamplight. Did you know, the prosecutor asks, that at the time of that incident the defendant lived 2 streets away from your flat? No, she says. I found that out when the police came back to speak to me. I'd seen him in the area before, though, noticed him without noticing him, if that makes sense. It does, someone mutters, too low for the judge to rebuke. Then it's Harris's turn. He walks slowly to the box, stick tapping softly, years of service etched into the lines around his eyes. He gives his name, his former rank, his role in the original investigation. The room is silent in a different way now, not out of horror, but out of something like curiosity edged with blame. Detective, the prosecutor says, can you tell the court why the area behind the bus depot wall where Emma was found was not thoroughly searched in 1985? Harris doesn't flinch. He could talk about resources, about manpower, about the way perimeter lines were drawn then. He could hide behind procedure. He doesn't. Because we missed it, he says plainly. We focused on the routes we understood, the areas we thought a body might be dumped based on what we'd seen before. We paid attention to canals, parks, open land. We did not fully comprehend how someone with intimate knowledge of that depot could use the blind spot behind a wall as effectively as he did. We walked past it, we stood on the other side of that wall and smoked our cigarettes while she was already buried there. That's on us. The defense sees an opening, they move in. So in other words, the original investigation was flawed. Yes, Harris says, flawed, under-resourced, limited by the era, all of that. And you expect this jury to trust conclusions built on those same flawed foundations? I expect this jury, Harris replies, to listen to the evidence you've heard today, the forensic analysis, the DNA, the reconstruction, the new witness work, and understand that while we failed then, the case has not stood still. We are not asking you to rely on our old assumptions. We are asking you to look at what we know now, including the fact that the man sitting in that dock worked at the depot that backs onto the place we found her, including the fact that he lied about key details when questioned, including the fact that his genetic material ties him to other attacks on women in the same area. The defense barrister opens his mouth, then closes it again. For a second, there's nothing to say that doesn't sound petty against the weight of that admission. Outside, headlines shift tone. It's no longer just cold case solved as a triumphant declaration. It's cold case exposed too, exposing old failures, old blind spots. The narrative splits, then braids. Justice delayed, justice pursued, justice still uncertain. In the middle of all this, in a small house away from the cameras, Emma's mother prepares the statement she might someday read in court if there is a conviction. The liaison officer has told her she doesn't have to do it, that someone else can read it for her, that it's entirely her choice. She has nodded, thanked him, closed the door, and sat at the kitchen table with a pen and a piece of paper that refuses to stay still under her hand. She writes about Emma's laugh, about the way she wrote in tiny, cramped letters to force more words onto a page, about the shoes left by the door, about the first night she didn't come home, about the 35 years where every ring of the phone was a possibility and a threat. She writes one line, then crosses it out, then writes it again. They say this case is solved, she writes, but for us, nothing about this feels like an ending. Back in court, the days stretch. Experts, officers, colleagues from the depot, neighbors, bus drivers who remember the defendant lingering on breaks, talking about silly girls walking home alone. Each testimony is another brushstroke on a picture that has been years in the making. The defense keeps pushing. They suggest alternative offenders, faceless someone else's who use the same dark streets. They hint that Emma might have willingly got into a car with a stranger. They point to the absence of direct physical evidence linking the defendant to her body. Is it possible, they keep asking, that you are simply seeing what you want to see because you do not want to admit this may never truly be solved? Ward sits behind the prosecution bench watching the questions land, watching the jurors' faces as they absorb, evaluate, weigh. He knows the defense is doing their job. He still feels his hands curl into fists under the table. Every night he goes back to the unit and stares at the map, the pins, the lines, the depot, the burial site, Emma's photograph. In the courtroom, it all becomes performance, argument, theater. Here, in this quieter room, it's just the raw, ugly shape of what one man did to a city's trust on a single wet night in 1985. The trial is moving. It's doing what it's supposed to do, forcing the past into language the present can judge. But as the days tick by and the defense keeps finding ways to say maybe not, one truth becomes clearer than ever to everyone touched by the case. The detectives, the jury, the family, the city watching from living rooms and phones. Even if the verdict comes back the way they hope, even if the judge's final words put the defendant behind bars for the rest of his life, there will always be a gap where a walk home should have been, a missing phone call, a bus ride that stopped under a flickering street lamp and never quite started again. The question now, as the prosecution begins to wrap their case and the defense sharpens their closing knives, is simple and impossible at the same time. Will 12 strangers be willing to say, beyond reasonable doubt, that the man who once sat alone in a car behind a depot wall is the same man who pressed his hands around Emma Caldwell's throat and left her to lie in the dark for 35 years? Outside, buses still pull up to that stop, doors hiss open. People step into the night, under new lights that seem too bright, too late. Some glance toward the depot wall without knowing exactly why. The city has learned the headline. It's waiting now with the rest of them to hear how this story, its story, is going to be told at the very end.